Judging that it would be dangerous to deal with them individually, the soldiers were ordered to stay behind for now. After considering how to deal with them, Hinata was scheduled to go into battle in the worst-case scenario, but now a problem had arisen that they had to worry about. Testarossa joined the conversation. On that note, it seems that some of my subordinates have been defeated. They were under strict orders to retreat before they died, so I didn't get much information. She didn't get much but would still disclose the information she had. Testarossa's subordinates were the Devil Chevalier. All of them a specialer rank, with existence values of over 100,000. It was no surprise that the magical inquisitors were no match for such a group of Devil Chevalier, who had chosen to retreat. Apparently, the experimental subjects were incarnated by angels. What is that? The ones that failed to incarnate are the monsters that are running rampant right now. And the ones who still have their egos intact. The enemy who had defeated the Devil Chevalier, Testarossa was convinced that it was one of Michael's men. After hearing Testarossa's explanation, Hinata tapped her fingers on the desk. The two remaining Holy Knight captains in the room were Arno and Fritz. Leonard, the second in command, was in charge on the scene with Bacchus and Rattace in tow. Thanks to the training in the labyrinth, even the common Holy Knights who were not captains had grown into powerful warriors. In fact, the captains had become so strong that they were capable of defeating Clayman-like opponents on their own. However, against an experiment of magical inquisitors fused with the power of angels, it would be dangerous to take them head-on. And with Michael's shadow flickering in the background as Rimuru's adversary, she decided that they shouldn't get involved carelessly. "Nicholas, you have a message from Luminos, right?" "That's right. She says it's not an urgent matter, but she can't send reinforcements." "That means there are other enemies." Luminos would never abandon Hinata. Therefore, the fact that she could not send reinforcements meant that there was a high possibility of other threats lurking about. If that was the case, they would have to protect the security of the royal capital with only the forces currently at hand. This is tough. That was the conclusion that Hinata came to. No matter how much the Holy Knight's abilities had improved, it was still a heavy burden to have them take on an enemy that was clearly superior to them. What's more, the monster has taken in the power of the angels and had become a light attribute. The holy purification barrier, which was effective against normal monsters, would not be effective at all. Well then, what should we do? Our usual winning tactics won't work. That's true. It would be one thing if it was just the monsters, but there are also Reiner and the others. That Reiner fellow, he is probably a success. Testarossa said, but only Hinata and Nicholas understood what she meant. "Ah, what do you mean by that?" Arno asked fearfully. "I tell you to think for yourself a little, but we don't have much time. If Reiner was also on death row, it wouldn't be strange if he was used as an experiment, right?" "Ah. I see, so it's possible that he's taken in the power of an angel." Arno and Fritz understood, and their faces paled at the same time. "It's not a possibility. Consider it a certainty," Testarossa told them ruthlessly. Now, that being the case, it was impossible for the Holy Knight Order to deal with this matter alone. Inevitably, it would be important to cooperate with Testarossa's forces. "So, what are you going to do?" Testarossa asked, and Hinata answered without hesitation. "I'm sure it's what the enemy wants, but I suppose we'll have to go to them for an explanation." Prince Elric claimed that Hinata was a kingslayer. There was no reason for Hinata to do such a thing, and she had a perfect alibi of being at the World Conference, so it was impossible for her claim to be accepted. However, that would only be true in normal peacetime. The current situation in the royal capital was chaotic. The people of Ingratia, accustomed to a world of peace, were in the midst of a catastrophe that had come out of the blue. If Hinata were to be killed here, all the claims about the real culprit would be accepted. In that case, running away was one option. Why don't we just escape to Lubelius instead of foolishly going out there? Fortunately, the Holy Church in the capital has a transport team, and there is also a transfer spell if you pass through the suburbs. As long as Hinata Summer is safe, there can be many possible explanations later on, right? Cardinal Nicholas remarked, and Hinata agreed, that it made sense. But she couldn't simply nod in agreement. It's impossible. We may be able to escape on our own, but we won't be able to take out the conference attendees, right? Once they're taken hostage, we won't have many other options. Everyone agreed with that. Exactly. Besides, let's not forget that the true enemy is not here. What would happen if the army of angels were to attack, and the nation's key figures were killed? Upon hearing this, Nicholas frowned. I see, you are right. If that were to happen, the cooperation between the nations would be torn apart. At the very least, no country would trust the kingdom of Ingratia. I see, if that happened, we wouldn't be able to fight against the angels. Fritz muttered with a bitter expression on his face, as if he had been convinced. In conclusion, there was no choice but to do as Hinata said. Based on her beliefs, Hinata set out to do what she could for now. She did not want to save everyone, but if there was someone in front of her who could still be saved, she would reach out to them, because that was how Hinata lived. Hinata knew very well that this would in turn lead to trust in them. Well, I guess that's settled. Now, let's decide the division of roles. Hinata said as such and declared that she would be Reiner's opponent. Testarossa nodded in agreement. I will go with you. Now, as for the monsters. Without waiting for Testarossa's words to finish, Arno and Fritz, who had become stiff and immobile, shouted. We do not need Testarossa Donno's help. Please leave it to us. If it's a monster without an ego and no intelligence, we can fight them. The light attribute is a bit of a problem, but we've been trained in the labyrinth, so we'll show you what we can do. Hinata looked at the two of them with a frown. Why are they so conscious of Testarossa Donno? She was taken aback, thinking that they were trying to look good in front of a beautiful woman. But the truth was something different. These two were truly scared of Testarossa. If they didn't perform well here, they would be branded as useless. If that happened, it would be unclear what would happen regarding their special labyrinth training in the future. Besides, Testarossa had many sympathizers, not just in the labyrinth. She also had followers among the members of the parliament, so there was a danger that they might lose their power to speak out in the future if they were not careful. This was how much Testarossa's influence had increased, but Hinata did not know that this was the case, having lost interest in politics. For Testarossa, this was a very important time. Despite Raimuru's orders to make the World Conference a success, she had allowed the enemy to invade. On top of that, she was responsible for being unable to stop the destruction in the capital. Giving priority to human life was no excuse for that. Behind her smile, Testarossa was burning with rage. That was why she approved of Arno and the others' suggestions. In that case, please do. I will lend you some of my subordinates and you can incorporate them into your unit. She told him as such and went on to help Arno and the others. This was all in preparation for her own move. She left the command to Arno and the others and gave them the task of restoring security to the capital. On top of that, she intended to strike the mastermind herself. Thus, the division of roles was decided. Well then, let's go now. We have to bring down the death penalty on those who have acted foolishly in this time of emergency. Hinata said coldly. She was going to get rid of Reiner here to clear her own name. And she would capture Elric and make him confess to his crimes. Or rather. Well, the evidence is irrelevant. Once all the criminals have been taken out, the right story will be in the hands of the victor. Is what Testarossa said. This was a declaration that she would do exactly what the enemy was trying to do. Testarossa was a demon who did not care about ethics, and she believed that as long as she was the winner, she could do whatever she wanted. It was a very Testarossa-like argument. And so, well aware that it was a trap, Hinata and the others headed to the stage where the enemy was waiting for them. Once they were outside the capital, they found things in a terrible state. Part of the royal castle in the center of the city had partially collapsed, spoiling its beautiful appearance. The aristocratic district, where the capital and the branch of the Holy Church were located, was relatively better, but the downtown area facing the main street of the city was on fire. It can't be helped that we prioritized evacuation, but this is going to be hard to clean up. Full-scale battles are still to come, and there will be more damage. With the loss of the king and his successor, it will take time for Ingratia to recover. Nicholas calmly responded to Hinata's murmur. It was a cold reaction, unbecoming of a priest. But that was Nicholas' normal behavior. For Nicholas, Hinata was the only priority, and he did not care about anything else. It was because he wanted to be of service to Hinata that he rose to the position of cardinal, the highest rank next to the Pope. It is because he was such a man that he was still accompanying Hinata without regard for danger. Incidentally, there were 5 of them now. Hinata, Testarossa, and Cardinal Nicholas, who had followed Hinata out of concern for her. These 3 were joined by Moss and Cian, who had been summoned. As they headed for their destination, they planned their strategy. Moss, you don't have to fight, just go into search mode and prepare for a surprise attack. Understood. Moss was a yes man. He obeyed Testarossa without saying anything else. Even so, he would sometimes say unnecessary things and get into trouble, but as he had been Testarossa's second-in-command for a long time, he knew how to take care of himself. This, Moss's search mode, was a kind of barrier of sorts. He dispersed his own fragmented clone into a hemisphere of 1 kilometer in diameter. This allowed him to react immediately to a surprise attack from 500 meters away. At first glance, this may not seem to be any different from universal perception, but that was not the case. That was because the speed of information transmission was much faster, and Moss's own analytical ability was also added to deal with enemy attacks. Moreover, 500 meters was a perfect distance for Testarossa, whose perceptual speed could be increased by 1,000,000 times with her skill. Even if it was an attack at the speed of light, under the influence of Moss's search mode, there would be more than a second before the attack would hit the target and it would be possible to deal with it. Of course, it was not possible to move at the speed of light, and this was merely extending the time being perceived, but Testarossa would still be able to manage. Moss's search mode seemed to be perfect, but it had only one drawback. That was, Moss was in the most danger because he was the one who would take the first hit. Even if I'm damaged by that surprise attack, I doubt she'll care. Although obedient, Moss still complained inwardly. Taking a glance at Moss's ability, Hinata saw through its nature. You are still wary of surprise attacks. So then, you're saying that the one making all the noise is a decoy? Testarossa smiled when she pointed this out. That's right. In the first place, we could narrow down the enemy's objective when they targeted this conference. To divide the West, or to aim directly at Rimuru. The biggest opportunity for them is Hiro Masayoki, who has become the Emperor of the Eastern Empire, correct? Testarossa's grin deepened as Hinata replied without a second thought. As expected of you, Hinata Dono. Rimuru-sama did approve of you. The flattery is nice. I'm sure it would be obvious to anyone who saw it. Not really, but that's fine. Testarossa chuckled as she thought of the faces of the people she had conversed with recently. She had been under a great deal of stress because many of them were not very perceptive. Those who did not listen to others were the worst. They would express their opinions only for their own benefit, and there were many times when they could not reach a consensus. Some of them would announce their agreements on their own after the meeting, and she had a good taste of the troublesome nature of political negotiations. There were even fools that the contract-oriented demon could not understand. Testarossa made sure that such people knew their place, but she had always wished that they would not create unnecessary trouble for her. In this respect, her conversation with Hinata was quick and pleasant. That's exactly what Rimuru-sama's objective must be. I suppose so. There was an incident elsewhere at the same time as this ruckus, and Rimuru was headed there. They must have prepared a pretty big bait, right? Yes, that's correct. Testarossa nodded. It had been agreed in advance that if Leon showed up, Rimuru would go. Testarossa had been told this, but Hinata had guessed it without knowing about it. Testarossa explained the situation to a certain extent, since she had already guessed so much. Upon hearing this, Hinata also pointed out some problems. It was a very pleasant conversation. I had heard that she was sharp, but I'd like to have her as my subordinate. Although, I'm sure Rimuru-sama would not approve. With Rimuru, just the fact that he allowed himself to be called by his own name suggested that Hinata was a special person. Moreover, when he was with Hinata, he seemed to return to his true self and appeared to enjoy himself very much. Just by knowing Rimuru like that, it was the reason Testarossa couldn't help but give Hinata a glance. It truly is enviable. However, I suppose I am honestly pleased that the woman Rimuru-sama recognizes is not a fool. Since ancient times, there had been numerous cases where a country had been turned upside down by a woman who had gained the favor of the king. In this respect, Hinata was not someone she had to worry about. In the first place, Rimuru and Hinata were not lovers, so Testarossa may have been thinking too much, but surprisingly, there were many people who thought like that. The only ones who didn't know were the two people themselves. At any rate, right now they needed to know about the enemy's objective. Restoring Demon Lord Leon to his senses and bringing him back to their side. That was their basic strategy. But of course, it was expected that the enemy would be aware of that goal. Feldway was smart enough to know that Rimuru-sama was the one who brought Vilgrind-sama to her senses. If so, from Testarossa's perspective, there was no doubt that Feldway was capable. Despite his many shortcomings, she was certain that he had a plan to deal with Rimuru. We should also assume that he had a winning strategy in mind when he used Demon Lord Leon as bait to lure Rimuru out. That's right. Testarossa nodded in agreement. Of course, there was no way Rimuru could not see that. He must have been able to plan far ahead, 65 seeing through the depths so that even Feldway's plan would be swallowed. Rimuru-sama was aware of this and went to rescue Demon Lord Leon. Testarossa assured her with absolute confidence. Hearing this, Hinata tilted her head in concern. But perhaps the enemy only called him over because they believed they could win. They say that Michael has taken in the power of the true dragons, but can Rimuru really win against such a monster? Hinata's concern was understandable. From Testarossa's perspective, it seemed impossible that Rimuru could be defeated. But that was not a question that could be answered at this stage when they had not even seen the real enemy. What if Feldway or Michael were waiting for Rimuru at the destination? Well, I'm sure they'll take care of it, though. Diablo and Sue were also there as escorts. She had no choice but to believe that Rimuru would be fine. If the enemy's goal was Rimuru, there was nothing for Hinata and the others to worry about. They could trust him, but the problem would be if the enemy had another objective. Although targeting the senators seems like a good idea, it's unlikely. I agree. There is no great advantage to splitting up the Western nations right now. If they were capable of defeating Rimuru, they wouldn't even bother with a united coalition of nations. The two agreed. After considering various other possibilities, they settled on the most likely conclusion. The enemy's target is Masayoki. So, where did His Majesty the Emperor disappear to? Hinata asked. At some point after the outbreak, Masayoki had disappeared from the capital. There were probably Imperial guards outside the capital, and the scorched dragon Vilgrind was at Masayoki's side. Rather, it seemed to her that Masayoki was the safest one here. That's why she had left him alone, but it was a different story if the enemy's target was Masayoki. Perhaps Vilgrind-sama realized what the enemy was after and evacuated the area. No matter what the enemy's intentions were, Masayoki's safety was the priority. Testarossa knew that Vilgrind would have thought the same. Then I guess it's safe to assume. It was at least better than defending themselves, Hinata agreed. If that was the case, the next thing to think about was their victory conditions. If the enemy's target is Masayoki, we're being used as bait, right? Do you think Masayoki will come to our rescue when we are about to be killed? Hinata had also known Masayoki before, so she knew that the boy was soft-hearted. However, Since he had become an emperor, he should put his own life first, and she believed that he would be cool-headed about it. Testarossa agreed with her. That's the main question. It is an unlikely assumption, but even if we were about to die, I don't think Masaaki Dono would come to our rescue. In this case, the problem was not just Masaaki's. Since Veilgrind was attached to him, there was no doubt that Masaaki should be given priority. Hinata and Testarossa agreed on this view as well. Therefore, the conclusion was also the same. Well, even if the people we're dealing with now only see us as bait, we have no reason to go along with them. You're right. Let's take out all of them and lure out those who are hiding. In the end, winning would solve all their problems. With a shared awareness of the possibility of surprise attacks, Hinata and the others arrived at their destination. Moss had disappeared, and only 4 people remained. Nicholas, you stay here. If we are victorious, secure Prince Elric immediately. Hinata did not say it, but it also meant to run away if they were defeated. Nicholas was not a weak man, but he was not strong enough to stand on this battlefield. That's why she gave the order. Understood. I wish you luck. Nicholas did not want to be a liability. He was prepared to use his own life as a shield in the event of Hinata's danger, but at that moment he obeyed quietly. Thus, Hinata and the others entered the square with only the 3 of them. When the group arrived at the square in the capital, they were met by a group of fully armed knights. Not including Elric and Reiner, there were nearly 20 of them. You finally arrived, I was tired of waiting. It was Reiner, whom Hinata knew well, who smirked and shouted. From a cursory observation, she could see that he had been strengthened tremendously. From the presence that she could feel, Hinata guessed that the amount of energy was greater than her own. I was right to leave Nicholas out of this. In a real fight, I definitely wouldn't have time to worry about him. If that happened, Nicholas would have been involved. As a mere human being, Nicholas would have had no way to survive, so Hinata was a little relieved. In any case, she ignored Reiner's words and analyzed the enemy's strength. Elric has no dominating energy, so it seems that he's still a normal human. But the others? Elric seemed to have been just playing the role of a portable shrine, and he looked the same as before. He was a little shabby, but that was probably because he had been under house arrest. The others, however, were a problem. There's an unusual air about them. I see, they're even more powerful than the Holy Knight captains. Perhaps they're even as powerful as me. Although it was impossible to say for certain just by looking at them, Hinata possessed the unique skill, mathematician. She analyzed the enemy and found them to be at least calamity class. Some of them, such as Louis and Roy, appeared to be comparable to disaster class, and with nearly 20 of them, it was going to be a tough fight even for the Saint Hinata. But that was not the biggest problem. Reiner is insane. He probably even outperforms me. Although not as powerful as Testarossa standing next to her, she could sense a great deal of power from him. This was dangerous, Hinata thought, and she became even more vigilant. If she could leave it to Testarossa, that would be the safest choice. But that was not possible. Because there was another man in this place who was just as dangerous. Yeah. Reiner, we're in luck. With 2 such beauties here, we won't have to fight with each other. No doubt. Brother Vega, I'll take Hinata as promised, is that okay? Of course. Eating such a weak woman won't make me any stronger. Well, you can still enjoy her in other ways, but I'm afraid I'm on a mission right now. That was Vega, the man laughing with a vulgar voice. He was sitting on the edge of the fountain with his legs spread wide, radiating a terrifying aura without even trying to hide it. Vega's attribute was evil itself, even though he had taken in the light attribute spiritual life form of an angel. It looks like I can't do anything about him. I might be able to stick it out, depending on my strength, but my chances of winning are probably close to 0. Hinata saw through this. In fact, Vega's existence value was over 10 million, more than 10 times greater than Hinata's. Even though Hinata also had a hidden trick up her sleeve, the probability of her winning seemed unlikely even if she were to use it. In that case, there could be no other opponent for Vega than Testarossa. Inevitably, Hinata's opponent would be Reiner. You are vulgar. I hate fools who don't know their place. Testarossa smiled bewitchingly and looked down on Vega as she said this. Hinata found her confidence to be reassuring. Cocky bitch. Fine then, I, the great leader of the 7 Angels of Death, will show you what I'm made of. Very easily, Vega was provoked. As a result, the battle between Testarossa and Vega was decided. There was no way to escape this momentum. Hinata asked with a relaxed manner. So, who's going to be my opponent? I couldn't move under all of those glares, perhaps you are all planning to challenge me? With that, she was trying to incite them into a one-on-one battle with Reiner. If they all came at her, Hinata would have little chance to win. Even if she and Xian fought together, they would only be able to kill about 10 people at most. However, if she could get rid of Reiner first, she would be able to discourage the remaining enemies. If that happened, they would not be able to show their full strength, and her chances of winning would be greatly increased. Incidentally, Hinata thought that Reiner would have no choice but to accept the challenge. The reason was that there were magical devices in various parts of the capital that were connected to the underground shelters so that people could see what was going on above ground. The stone statue in the fountain of the main square was one of them, and the conversation between Hinata and Reiner was known to the people of the capital. Elric also knew this, which is why he was making a big speech here, and of course Reiner knew it too. If he runs away from the battle here, he will never be able to clear our name. Reiner would think so, Hinata thought. Her expectation was correct. Kukaku, I've been taken as a fool. I was a bit out of sorts at that time. I will prove it by beating you here. Thus, Reiner and Hinata were also thrown into battle with each other. Hinata drew her sword. It was a gem given to her by Rimuru. It was not a unique grade rapier. Since then, improvements had been made, and Kurobi's skills had improved, so the quality had risen to the legendary grade. The weapon's name was Phantom Pain. Even though it was of the same legendary grade level, its quality was lower than that of the Moonlight Sabers. However, this Phantom Pain could perfectly reproduce the Dead-End Rainbow. The sword she used when fighting Rimuru was capable of completely destroying the spiritual body on the 7th attack. This sword, however, was capable of destroying even the astral body. Needless to say, it was more powerful and stronger than the Moonlight Saber in terms of usability. Are you ready? You idiot, that's my line. And so, the battle began. Hinata, as usual, analyzed the enemy's strength and searched for their weaknesses. At first glance, Reiner appeared to be a human, but his true nature seemed to have been transformed into a different creature. As evidence of this, his body movements were strange. Apart from walking, Reiner smoothly moves sideways. He even kicked the ground and jumped into the air in the same position. The secret seemed to be hidden in the soles of his shoes, but what was more striking were his shoulders. It was obvious that he was hiding something. Die. Reiner swung his sword wide and swung at Hinata. Instead of deflecting it, Hinata quickly twisted her body to avoid it. It was the correct response because she had sensed a premonition of danger. That sword feels more powerful than just legendary grade. I see, it's mythical grade. She didn't know how or where he got it, but it was the moment when she got a glimpse of Reiner's power. At this point, the difference in weapon performance was also disadvantageous. There was a risk that Hinata's Phantom Pain would be shattered if they were to slash each other properly. In reality, there was a huge gap between the two players' existence values. Although Hinata was a saint, she carried the hero's egg, but it never hatched and was left to Chloe. Her power as saint remained unchanged, but it was a little over 1,000,000 in terms of existence value. It was strong enough for a human. In fact, it was equal to King Garzel, but it was not as strong as Reiner, who was equivalent to 2,000,000. However, this was only in terms of physical strength. Hinata had the memory and experience of traveling with Chloe. This was still alive and well in Hinata's pure skill level. There was a huge difference from when she had faced Reiner before, and when looking at things in overall strength, Even if you put the difference in weapon performance into perspective, Hinata was much stronger. It was as if Hinata's victory was guaranteed as soon as she could get into a one-on-one fight. But that was only if Reiner had been a knight of fair character. Hinata had misjudged him. Hinata had thought that Reiner was quite a lowly character, but Reiner was a coward beyond her imagination. Hinata was also quite cautious and never let her guard down, but there were unimaginably stupid people in this world who were even lower than the lowest of the low. Reiner was exactly such a person. She didn't know and didn't care if this was due to his innate nature or if he had been distorted by the experimentation. What was important here was that Reiner did not intend to simply fight her from the beginning. Hinata continued to dodge Reiner's sword, going back and forth several times. Then, at the right moment, she flicked Reiner's sword away from his side. This made her sure of victory and she gave Reiner a chance. "Ha, you're not as good as you say you are. If you surrender." She would arrest Reiner as a traitor and put him on trial, showing him unnecessary mercy. This proved to be fatal. Reiner had fallen into a position where his men were standing behind Hinata. They all attacked her from behind, as if they had planned to do so. Of course, Hinata had prepared for the surprise attack with magic perception, and was also connected to the telepathy net with Moss, so she was warned. However, it was Reiner that she needed to be wary of, and she could not afford to devote her attention to a bunch of random people. That was why she knew that she had no chance to win if they were outnumbered. She had to accept a certain amount of attacks. It was an instantaneous event. Hinata Dono. Faster than Sion's shout, numerous light bullets exploded into Hinata. And then, as Reiner laughed loudly, he struck again. There was no sword in his hand, but his body was also covered by a mythical-grade full-body armor. His shoulders were wide open, and 2 pairs of thin, hard hands covered with mythical-grade armor sprouted out. They turned into 4 spears and pierced Hinata's limbs. Losing her support, Hinata fell to the ground. The sword fell from her hand. She lost her grip and could barely stand. "Ha ha ha. You've been acting all high and mighty, but you're no better than your mouth. You're too cocky, you're better off lying on the ground like that." Reiner laughed in an annoying high-pitched voice. "Bastard. Wasn't this supposed to be a fair fight?" Reiner snickered at Sion's sullen shout. "Criminals don't have any human rights, but hey, we're merciful. If you cry and beg for forgiveness, we'll at least consider postponing the time of your execution for a little while." With that said, Reiner gave her a smirk. Without waiting for Hinata's reply, he continued with his selfish argument. "However, you'll have to show some gratitude." The smile on Reiner's face was unpleasant, as if he was thinking vulgar thoughts. Reiner's subordinates did the same. "Ha ha ha. The strongest of the West is looking good. I guess the undefeated which will have to be put down now." No, we're just getting too strong." It only looked like a good match because Reiner Summer was playing with her. And so on, they continued their self-serving comments. It was unclear if they had always been like that or not. However, it was a fact that they were inexplicably foolish. Hinata's appearance had become too cruel. The torn back of her Holy Spirit armor revealed her bare, burned skin. The tendons of her limbs had been severed so that she could not even move them. In spite of such misery, her bare face, wet with sweat, was beautiful. Her eyes never lost their brightness, and Hinata's dignified expression showed that she had not given up yet. "Come on then, cry and beg for forgiveness. Or shall I kill you right now?" Reiner shouted, his eyes bloodshot with madness. The sight of Hinata crawling on the ground had given him a rush of lecherous pleasure. By now, Reiner's rational mind had practically jumped away. Hinata was normally beyond his reach, a flower of the highest order, and to be able to violate such a high being surpassed all the pleasures Reiner had ever felt. No matter how much of a fool Reiner was, he was aware of his inferiority compared to Hinata. No, he had realized it the moment he faced her. No matter how much he outclassed her in strength, he could not overturn the difference in quality. Even in terms of sword skills alone, Hinata's ability was light years ahead of Reiner's. Reiner had practically been mad with jealousy when he was confronted with this fact. That was why he had no hesitation in executing the trap that he had prepared for just in case. It was not as he had originally planned, but the result was all right. I'm also lucky that her face wasn't damaged. I will enjoy watching her beautiful face contort and cry out in pain. Reiner felt his blood boil and his strength pervade his body. Just imagining Hinata in such a state made him feel black joy well up from the pit of his stomach. Now that this was the case, Reiner believed that his victory was unassailable. That was why he would beat Hinata into submission. And after that, there would be another kind of fun waiting for him. He thought it would be a shame to kill her now. Hey! If you don't hurry up, I'll really kill you. Reiner declared in a chilling voice. It was a serious threat. Part of him wanted to feel the pleasure of tormenting Hinata, but Hinata's strength was real. If her heart had not been broken at this point, he should have at least cut off her hands and feet. Reiner was a coward. That's why he was cautious and thought about what he was doing. Even if Hinata were to call the others now, it would take them a long time to arrive. In the first place, it was unlikely that they could gather enough forces to fight against them. Besides, if he sensed any sort of sign, he could give the order to attack as soon as possible. He had the absolute advantage. There was nothing to lose. Hinata did not reply, but kept staring at Reiner. Her eyes told him that she hadn't lost yet. Tisk, you really are a cocky bitch. In that case, I'll drop a leg off you. Reiner raised his sword in annoyance and swung it down towards Hinata. Hinata was in mortal danger, but Testarossa couldn't afford to help her. She has her hands full with Vega. Besides, she could tell from the look in her eyes that Hinata had not given up. In that case, she had to believe. She was one of the few people who managed to beat Rimuru-sama to a draw. I don't think she'll just leave so quickly in such a place. If that's what happened, then that's what would happen. Although it was very likely that Rimuru would be furious, Testarossa had not been ordered to protect Hinata. There were times for her to act in discernment, but for Hinata it felt like it was not her business. In fact, it seemed to be more likely to hurt Hinata's pride and displease Rimuru if she did something without permission. Testarossa decided that it would not be too late to come to the aid of Hinata after her defeat had been confirmed. So, without hesitation, she concentrated on Vega for now. Vega was a nuisance. Vega's magical count was several times larger than Testarossa's, but she thought it would be easy to kill him. However, it seems that she was wrong. This guy, he's got roots all the way underground. If so, can he absorb the corpses to make his damage go away? It was exactly as Testarossa was thinking. Vega had spread his power all over the capital of Ingratia, capturing and absorbing the corpses of the monsters that were still being defeated. It did not increase his strength, but it was the perfect way to replenish his missing parts and replenish his energy. This made Vega practically immortal. What an annoyingly troublesome opponent. That was Testarossa's true opinion. It might be possible to destroy him by burning down a large area with nuclear magic. But in order to do so, she needed to understand Vega in his entirety. That alone would have been a hassle, but even before that, she couldn't afford to do so. As long as they were fighting here in the royal capital of Ingratia, any action that would lead to the destruction of the city was basically forbidden. They were allowed to escape, but they were not allowed to do anything to win. In that case, it would be almost impossible to kill Vega. Moreover, it was not a good idea to hunt Vega down. If she did so, there was a high possibility that he would use the people of the royal capital who had fled underground as bait and try to regenerate himself. For now, he still had Reiner's subordinates who had turned into monsters, and absorbing them would be enough. However, if she cornered him further, Vega would probably resort to any means necessary. From Testarossa's perspective, she was being forced to fight a battle where she could not see a way to win. What made this situation even more frustrating for her was, Hey, what's the matter? For someone with all that bravado earlier, you're not doing much at all. It was the attitude of Vega, who was getting carried away. It's not easy to make me want to kill someone from the bottom of my heart. You should be proud of that. Testarossa inwardly snapped. However, it was true that she could not afford to do so. She flicked her flaming whip and toyed with Vega, but her mind was able to see 2 or 3 moves ahead. As long as she was unable to get into a checkmate situation, she had no choice but to maintain the stalemate. In order to break that stalemate, some external factor would be necessary. There was a hidden force on the enemy side. There was no doubt about that, so Testarossa and her team were at a disadvantage from a broader perspective. If there was one factor that tipped the scales in Testarossa's favor, it was the presence of Veilgrind. However, she was unlikely to leave Masayuki's escort. It's likely that Feldway's target is also Masayuki Dono. Veilgrind's Summer is not so naive as to dare to play into the hands of the enemy. Naturally, Veilgrind must be aware of Feldway's intentions. In that case, Testarossa believed that Veilgrind would not come to their aid. And at the same time, Testarossa understood that they were being treated as bait to lure Masayuki out. This stalemate was a good situation for Feldway and his group. It's really frustrating. I know what I'm doing, but I'm just going to have to live with it. Apparently, Carrera and Ultima have their hands full, and there is no one else in their ranks who can move. If only Zijin and the others could come. No, Rimuru-sama wouldn't approve of that. She knew that her colleagues were also struggling, as evidenced by the emergency call through the control room. The control room had now declared a state of emergency and had shifted into combat mode. They were preparing for an enemy invasion, and there was no way that Zijin, the key defender, could leave. Zijin was the only one who could be relied upon to move freely. The others were not weak, but they were not strong enough to overcome any situation. No, there was also the superpower force of Veldora, but he couldn't make the foolish move of leaving the labyrinth when Michael was after him. In other words, no reinforcements were coming. Testarossa had no choice but to conclude that she would have to fend for herself. But then, something unexpected happened. Reiner swung his sword down on Hinata. At that moment, "Queeing!" A clear tone rang out as it was caught by someone's sword. No, it was not a sword. What the beautiful woman was holding in her hand was a feather fan that did not look like a weapon at all. The name of the beautiful woman, whose shining blue hair was fluttering in the air, it was the scorched dragon Veilgrind. Hinata, was it? Didn't my foolish brother say that he proved that the skills you've developed and perfected could reach us true dragons? Wasn't that the case, Testarossa? If that's true, I will not allow you to be defeated in a place like this. That's what Veilgrind was saying. She ignored Reiner and turned her gaze to Testarossa. That's right, Veilgrind Summer. That said, I wasn't expecting you to come. Ufufu, you're right. I didn't plan on intervening, but Masayuki did. Veilgrind turned to Masayuki, her eyes full of compassion. What she saw before her was, "Are you okay, Hinata-san?" "Ah." It was Masayuki squeezing Hinata's breasts. The man in question, Masayuki, appeared to be in a dignified state, but on the inside, he was in a state of panic. What the hell is going on? Due to the sudden event, Masayuki instantly lost all sense of reality. Or rather, this feeling on my right hand is. There was a soft and fluffy feeling coming from the palm of his right hand. This was the moment when Masayuki's brain finally started to process what it was. In other words, it was caused by Masayuki getting distracted by Hinata. When he tried to help Hinata up, he tripped over a pebble that had fallen at his feet. As a result, Masayuki fell and carefully pushed Hinata down as well. Then his right hand touched Hinata's chest regardless of Masayuki's intention. It was a lucky deviance 66, to say the least. And what's more, thanks to the proximity of their lips, Hinata's true face could also be seen clearly. Her widened eyes sparkled like blackish-purple amethysts. Her nose was straight, and her lips were full and fresh. Her fine skin was translucent without any makeup. She's a really beautiful woman. It's no wonder Rimuru-san can't resist her. This was Masayoki's way of escaping from reality. It was understandable. Hinata's breath tickled his nostrils, and the sweet smell of her breath made his brain swoon. If it hadn't been for Vielgrin's repeated hugs and experiences, he might have fainted from sheer joy. It seemed like a long time, but it all lasted less than a second. Masayoki's brain rebooted and he realized that he could not keep staring at her forever. Hinata's eyes widened in surprise, and Masayoki thought, of course she did. It was only natural that people would think, what is this guy doing? He was afraid that Hinata would come to her senses. Masayoki feared that something terrible was waiting for him. It's not what it looks like. It's not true, Masayoki was screaming in his heart. Masayoki turned more and more pale as he tried to stand up and make an excuse. Huh? Just now, something just. Masayoki felt a jolt on his back and realized that something had just passed over him. Then he felt a creeping sense of dread. Masayoki? What followed next was Vielgrin's scream. It was not a voice of anger towards Masayoki, but rather a voice of sincere concern. What had just happened? In fact, right at the very moment of Masayoki's fall, someone had attacked. Vielgrin was the only one who saw it coming. It was an attack that even Testarossa could not detect. At any rate, she was in a hurry to check the link with Moss. But before she even had the chance to call out to Moss, Masayoki managed to avoid the attack by accidentally falling. If he had not stumbled, his life would have been cut short. A lucky boy, indeed. The lucky guy showed a remarkable performance this time as well. Whoa! Was I really being targeted? Masayoki, who found out late, was paling away in a different way, but he was still lucky that it was over. And then, Hinata moved. It would have been extremely dangerous and foolish to stay still in a place that was being targeted. Therefore, Hinata rolled over and took Masayoki in her arms. Masayoki was moved. The happy feeling of being embraced, the silky and comfortable feeling of Hinata's hair on his cheek. It tickled and smelled so good, he wanted to escape from reality. However, that was not allowed. Or rather, this was not the time. Tisk, no way. I never thought you'd be able to avoid my assassination attempt. A man in a black costume with pure white wings on his back let out a cry of astonishment. It was Arios. The unique skill murderer, whose base was the ultimate enchantment punishment, King Sandalphone, had the power of presence concealment. It was a skill that made those under its influence unrecognizable until some action was taken. With this skill, he and Feldway had been hiding and watching the situation this whole time. And then, just as Masayoki appeared on the scene, he launched a desperate assassination attempt which failed miserably. Arios was ready to try again, but two men stood in front of him. Masayoki's enemies are my enemies. Well, that's how it is. I won't let you lay a hand on His Majesty. And with that, Venom and Minutes had entered the fray. A little later, Bernie and Ji-woo also showed up. I was charged with protecting His Majesty's person, yet I overlooked the assassin. For this sin, I will. No, it's fine. Bernie and Ji-woo had been hiding and guarding Masayoki, but they hadn't realized that Arios was lurking within the perimeter. This was not either of their faults, but it was definitely a big blunder. However, Masayoki was in a panic to deny it. If he didn't, the two of them might have taken the blame and committed suicide or something annoying like that. At any rate, he decided to tell them to focus on the enemy for now, and let this matter go unanswered. As a result, the four of them took up arms against Arios to protect Masayoki. The battlefield had been rearranged. Testarossa and Moss were on high alert. Cyan was fighting alone against the knights, trying to keep them restrained. Hinata was struggling to stand up, and Masayoki was in a quandary as he was lending a shoulder. Venom and the Empire's top executives had come to protect Masayoki. Nicholas, who had called for Vielgrind and Masayoki, or rather had joined them on the way, was furious at the sight of Hinata's miserable state. And Vielgrind was smiling bewitchingly. On the other side, Reiner, unable to finish off the cornered Hinata, looked disgruntled. Vega was smirking and enjoying the situation. Arios was unsuccessful in his attack. Feldway was displeased with the failure of his plan just after it seemed like it had succeeded completely. And then there were Reiner's subordinates who were still alive and well. With Masayuki and Vielgrind now on the battlefield, the situation had become even more chaotic. The residents of the royal capital listened to the broadcast with anxiety. Those who could see the images had their eyes glued to the screen. Although Reiner's words were uncomfortable, there was no doubt that Prince Elric was on his side. However, as the battle intensified, people were turned off by Reiner's cruelty. He fought in a vile manner, unbecoming of a knight. Besides, it was not the knights led by Reiner who were still desperately defending the capital, but the Holy Knight Order and Templar Knights under Hinata's leadership. Regardless of whose words were true, it was Hinata's knights that they wanted to trust. There were some who supported Elric, but the ratio of those who supported Elric became smaller and smaller. And when Hinata was in trouble, everyone prayed for her safety in front of the screen. This wish was fulfilled by the appearance of a certain person. Small whispers began to escape from the mouths of those who saw the shining figure. "It's the hero Summer. Hero Summer. It's the hero Summer. It's Masayuki Summer. Hero Masayuki Summer has returned. Masayuki Summer has returned as the Emperor." And it didn't take long for them to become a huge chorus, Masayuki, Masayuki. Everywhere, all over the underground evacuation shelters, the grounds were trembling from the cheers. This phenomenon was not limited to the people. It was the same for the surviving royalty and influential aristocrats as well. No one would be so foolish as to be unable to discern whether Elric's justification was true or false. Hinata, who had protected humanity as the guardian of law and order, had no reason whatsoever to kill the king. On top of that, this was the middle of a world conference, and the Kingdom of Ingratia, the venue of the conference, was fully guarded. Even if she really had been targeting the king, she would not have acted on it now. If there was anyone who would do such a thing, it would be none other than a force that wished to bring chaos to human society. Even the ruler of the underworld, Reg, had unofficially offered their cooperation to ensure the success of this world conference. Without the development of human society, there would be no future for the underworld. It was a very plausible argument, and the upper echelons of the kingdom had also chosen to work together. Therefore, the only people who would cause dissonance here were those who did not understand the situation. In other words, it was the opinion of those in power that Prince Elric himself was the ringleader. The people were confused, but thanks to Masayuki Dono, they have regained their composure. That's all well and good, but it puts us in an awkward position. Indeed. If we had missed the true mastermind and left everything to the hands of others from another country, we would have been criticized later, no doubt. The palace knights have been destroyed, but there are still other forces left, aren't there? Deploy the 4 armies on all sides of the royal capital. All of our troops. Understood. And with that, the plan to bring the situation under control started at once. Masayuki may be a champion, but he was now the emperor of the Eastern Empire. Since they couldn't lift him up, they at least had to sweat it out themselves. The 3 drunk sages also made a move. The 3 leaders do not want chaos in this land. It would be foolish to lose our forces unnecessarily, so it will be just me and the Musketeers Corps 67 who will go. Glenda Adley said as such. A number of prototype weapons had been secretly developed at Tempest and were never expected to see the light of day. The Musketeer Corps, led by Glenda, was the supplier of these weapons. They were her prized subordinates, who had been secretly modified in the Empire. Their individual combat abilities were at least A rank, and they were skilled in the use of various weapons. They had a variety of vicious weapons, such as small anti-tank guns, rocket launchers, and handheld Gatling guns. The ammunition used in these weapons was not ordinary, but was a hazardous material that had been designated for use only by those with specialized knowledge. Its power could only be guessed at. Now then, let's go. Yes. Best of luck to you. 68. Even if we die, our souls will surely be reborn as Majins in the eyes of God. I'm not asking for that kind of thing, Glenda thought, but she laughed at her colleague's thoughtfulness. Then, with less than 100 subordinates in tow, she leapt onto the battlefield. Masayuki was bewildered by the rapidly changing situation. He felt completely left out of everything that was going on. However, one comment from Hinata made Masayuki feel more trapped than ever. "So, how long do you intend to keep squeezing my breasts?" she asked him. PFFFFT. Masayuki couldn't help but choke. "I'm not squeezing them. It was just a touch of my hand," he tried to make an excuse, but as he unconsciously turned to face Hinata at close range, Masayuki tensed up at the sight of her beauty. There were many beautiful women in Tempest, but they were of the nature of extraordinary beauty. The same was true of Veilgrind, whose beauty was similarly outside the realm of humanity. In contrast, Hinata's beauty was that of a familiar Japanese face. Although her beauty had been enhanced by becoming a saint, she still possessed a unique charm that made one feel at ease. But one shouldn't be fooled by appearances. Masayuki had heard a lot about her from Rimuru. Hinata was the only one who must never be offended. Even Veldora agreed. "She's a persistent woman. No matter what you do, she will surely be avenged," he had warned him with a straight face. It would be unfortunate if Masayuki were to do something inappropriate with someone who had made a demon lord and a true dragon fear her. Fully aware of this, Masayuki hurriedly jumped to his feet and apologized to Hinata. Incidentally, although she pretended to be calm at that time, Hinata was also very upset. She had never had her breasts squeezed by another person before and was wondering how she should react. If it had been intentional, Hinata would have taken appropriate measures to deal with it, but in Masayuki's case, it was completely unavoidable. This made Hinata's judgment waver, and ultimately saved Masayuki's life. "I'm sorry. It was by no means on purpose," he stuttered, unable to come up with a good excuse. But Masayuki's words were interrupted by Hinata. "Just kidding. I know it was a force majeure," she said with a smile on her face. Despite the smile, Masayuki couldn't stop the cold sweat running down his spine. In fact, he had no idea what was going on. His understanding couldn't catch up. He wanted to tell her frankly, but he felt like he would be doomed if he did, so he could only keep silent. "You can't be seriously offended by a mere breast rub, can you?" "Hey, Masayuki, I'll let you squeeze mine as much as you want," Veilgrind dropped a bomb with a laugh. "No thank you" couldn't be said. Masayuki was still a young man after all. However, he sincerely hoped that such a meeting would be held in a quiet and unobtrusive place. Hinata looked at them with a furtive glance, but when she tried to get up, she groaned in pain. "Hi Hinata-sama," Cardinal Nicholas shouted as he rushed over and held Hinata up. Her arms and legs were still pierced, and she could not even stand up. "I will treat you immediately," he said, panicking as he performed an impressive high-ranking holy magic high heel with great skill. Hinata immediately recovered and returned to the battlefield. Thus, the rearranged battle resumed. "Hi Hinata-sama, is this okay? Why don't you leave this to Masayuki Dono?" Nicholas asked, but Hinata turned a deaf ear to his suggestion. Masayuki, who was horrified by Nicholas' words, was greatly relieved to learn that Hinata had no intention of doing so. There was nothing else to do but to ask Hinata to do her best. Knowing this, Hinata gave a small smile. It was a truly cruel smile, a true expression of Hinata's beauty, a beautiful woman wearing men's clothing. To tell the truth, Hinata had lost her temper with Reiner. And more than that, she could not forgive herself for her mistake of being careless. "No, there's no problem. I'm done waiting around." It was a declaration of victory. There was no room for pity for the person who had tortured her so much. Hinata had completely read the path to victory. Hinata looked at Reiner with a benevolent smile on her face. Her eyes, however, remained cold. "Well, now then. I'll take you seriously, so be prepared. Damn you. You're the one who killed the king, you big sinner, and now, I'm done playing with you. I'll kill you. You will never be able to win against me no matter what, you coward." "Funny you should say that." You're the one who's a coward. There was nothing more annoying than having the truth pointed out to you, Reiner gritted his teeth. Tisk, I guess you misunderstood. I took it easy on you because you're a woman, you know. I was trying to be gentle with you, so I wouldn't accidentally kill you. Even so, I can't forgive your attitude. Reiner's eyes were bloodshot with excitement, and his mind was on the verge of going insane. In anticipation of this, Hinata continued to instigate him. Is that so? Well then, you'd better get yourself together and prove it to me. Hinata was no longer careless. She knew that Reiner was not a chivalrous man, and she had no intention of showing mercy to such a vulgar being. Perhaps Reiner understood this, and he howled with his face turning red. I won't forgive you even if you cry. Fine then, I'll grant you your wish. Over and over again, I'll slash and slash and slash. Reiner's sole purpose was to show off his strength to his subordinates and the public by overwhelmingly overpowering Hinata. Normal judgment was no longer something he could hope for. Perhaps sensing this, Hinata looked at Reiner coldly. There was not a trace of kindness in her eyes, and they were filled with contempt. Reiner rushed towards Hinata. Unperturbed, Hinata readied her phantom pain. And then, their swords clashed. Hi-ah-ah-ah-ah. Die-die-die-dee-ee-ee. Reiner shouted with an expression full of madness. The sword he swung down with all his might had the power to kill, but it was no match for Hinata. It could shatter even the phantom pain if taken seriously, but there was no need to meet it head-on. There was no need to hesitate anymore. Even though Reiner's physical ability was better than Hinata's, it did not matter to her. She dodged Reiner's sword lightly and aimed at the gap in his armor to stab him. Yaa? Reiner screamed. The intense pain rushed through his body, and he regained his composure for a moment. What is this pain? Didn't I gain power and become immune to such half-hearted attacks? He became Viga's servant and had gained the power of a staff officer grade phantom. In addition, now that he had been given mythical grade armor, there was no way he could be defeated by Hinata. Moreover, the fact that he could feel pain was unusual. He could not hide his confusion at the fact that his pain blocker was ineffective. The damage itself was not serious, but the pain did not seem to subside. Reiner gritted his teeth. Earlier, he had thought that he was just in bad shape, but now he was beginning to show serious impatience. You foo. Did I hurt you? Cry harder and entertain me. Hinata had an ecstatic expression on her face and lasciviously moistened her lips with her tongue. This gesture suited Hinata very well. It was reminiscent of a superior predating on the inferior. While Nicholas was staring at Hinata with a passionate gaze, Masayuki was horrified. It was a gesture that might create a rabid fan base among some of the sexually inclined, but for Masayuki, it was a pity. This person is scary. I'll make sure to never offend Hinata-san. He was truly convinced that Rimuru was right. Hinata pursued Reiner without caring about the reactions of the people around her. Fearing the incomprehensible pain of the stab, Reiner desperately tried to defend himself. However, the attack was not so sweet that it could be escaped from. Now die. Dead End Rainbow. With a fluid movement, Hinata accurately pierced Reiner. Each blow was painful and tormented Reiner. This much? If I can endure this pain, Gugya-a-o-o. Because his mind had been destroyed, there was no way he could endure it. To begin with, Reiner's physical body had been strengthened tremendously, but his mental body was still immature. Even if he had absorbed the phantom, which was a spiritual life form, his mental defense had not been strengthened. Help me, Viga-san. The pain won't go away. Reiner tried to heal the damage he had suffered, but he could not heal his mind. It was not surprising that Reiner, who was in a state of panic due to the intense fear and suffering, lost his normal judgment and was unable to do anything. Moreover, because his spiritual body had grown too large, the time he spent in pain was much longer. It was so bad that he thought he would rather be dead. At the beginning of the battle, Venom had been the main opponent for Arios, with the remaining 3 players serving as supporters to keep Arios in check. Masayuki stood with his arms crossed, watching Venom's battle, or more accurately, standing there and staring in the general direction. The occasional glow was the only proof that the battle was still going on, as the speed was too fast for Masayuki to follow with his eyes. It was impossible for him to understand what was happening. He was just pretending to be able to see. I mean, there's nothing I can do about it. Not wanting to get in the way, he left the fighting to the others. Masayuki now understood exactly what he was capable of. It was on the level of enlightenment, so his sense of fear was diminishing. Even so, fear was still fear. To distract himself from his fear, Masayuki recalled a happy memory. That is, the feeling that lingered in his right hand, the softness and warmth of Hinata's breast. Of course, Grin-san 69 would let me squeeze them without asking, but that's not the point. I'm afraid of what might happen later, so I think it's a little different. In this respect, Hinata was wonderful. She was quite scary, but he was forgiven for something unavoidable. With this, there was no need to worry anymore. He could enjoy his happiness without worrying about the future. Without even realizing it, Masayuki's happy mood had a tremendous impact on the scene. In response to Masayuki's wish, a lucky field was set up, granting an immense blessing for all those who stood by Masayuki. The truth of the world had been reached, the ultimate skill king of heroes was in full effect. As such, Venom and the others had a relative advantage in the battle. Venom attacked without hesitation, as if he were strolling along on a walk. Doom enemy. The claws on Venom's hands turned jet black and grew long. The surface of his claws vibrated finely with a technique that generated waves that could split all matter. Clicking his tongue, Arios evaded. But it didn't stop there. How naive. Leaving the mutter behind, Minutes took aim at Arios, who had lost his stance. He tilted his body unnaturally, ignoring gravity and inertia, and rushed forward like a cannonball. With his unique skill oppressor, he adjusted his trajectory to Arios, forming an obstacle-free path. He then compressed and exploded the air under his feet to gain thrust. Minutes reached his maximum speed in an instant and unleashed a barrage of blows that left Arios no time to react. "You small fry, you're getting carried away." Arios, who had been headbutted in the jaw and knee-kicked in the stomach, glared at Minutes in fury, but Arios could not afford to do so. "Assassination is my specialty." A black flash of light ripped through Arios. Ji-woo, who had been hiding in perfect cover, had aimed for the moment when Arios' mind was turned to Minutes. As Arios tried to retreat, a spear of lightning pierced him. It was Bernie's special strike, a condensed version of thunder rain fused with spearmanship. "Don't forget about me, either." Even though he had lost his ultimate enchantment alternative, it was a skill he had once acquired. Bernie had tried his best to be useful to Emperor Masayuki and was able to recreate his former abilities to some extent. The same was true for Ji-woo. Incidentally, Minutes had become stronger than before, but he seemed to have been empowered by experience, just as he said he loved fighting. Perhaps the strength of will had something to do with the fact that people with abnormal personalities became stronger. That's what Bernie thought, but he wasn't stupid enough to say that. Right now, he honestly felt that strong friends were reassuring, and so, the four of them put up a good fight against Arios, who was incomparably stronger in terms of existence value. Moreover, this did not change even when Arios became serious. "Humph, I don't have time to play around here. I'm going to give it my all, so be prepared," Arios politely declared as he held two daggers in his hands. The mythical grade 2 sword style was Arios' original style of melee combat. "Damn them, they're only halfway competent, and yet they're still getting in my way." Arios was indignant. Arios was convinced that this would be the best way to deal with the small fry without much trouble. It turned out that he was careless in the next attack. A slash of divine speed struck Venom, slicing off the black claws that had barely caught him. Even the vibrations that cut through all matter seemed powerless before the mythical grade weaponry, or so it seemed. As if it was a natural result, Arios kept his expression unchanged and looked at Venom with a smile. It was as if he was looking at an insect. "This is the difference in strength between you and me," he seemed to say with an air of pride on his face. But then it was distorted by an impossible situation. Pain shot through both of Arios' arms. "Ha ha, look at you. I'm lucky, I didn't think you'd get 2 stabs." Arios' expression twitched when heard Venom's laughter. As Venom pointed out, Arios had 1 black claw in each of his arms. Arios was so proud of his superiority that he had looked down on Venom and the others as inferior. And yet, he had been wounded. He hadn't really been serious a while ago, but this time that wasn't the case. Arios was getting impatient because he could tell that he had not been careless. "Bastard, you were aiming for this?" "Well, yeah. I was hoping it would be a little more difficult, but I've been lucky again today." "I thought I'd be lucky to get 1, Venom said, making no secret of his true feelings. "That's right. When one was with Masayuki, they were lucky enough to be loved every day. It wasn't the kind of luck that made you win over women or gambling, so he didn't always feel it, but he felt that everything he did would go better than expected." "Damn bastard, I won't take it easy on you anymore." "Idiot. You just said you were going to give it your all." Venom cheerfully incited Arios, who was filled with anger. Venom was now using himself as bait. The larger the gap between Arios and his friends, the easier it would be for them to move. Although Venom mocked Arios with his words, in reality, he was not letting his guard down. He quickly regenerated his severed black claws and focused his attention on Arios' movements. And rightly so? Venom was not overconfident in his power. It hadn't been long since he had been reincarnated as a demon, and thanks to the overwhelming presence of Diablo, he had learned to see himself from a thoroughly objective point of view. "He's a tough one. Aside from this good luck, we're completely outclassed in terms of strength. It's time for me to switch places with Bernie and focus on being an attacker instead of a decoy." This time, Venom had been assigned as a decoy because he was judged to be the most difficult to kill. Normally, Bernie played the main role of shield, so this time it was an irregular division of roles. The so-called evasive shield was the role that Venom was expected to play. It would be the end if Arios' attack hit. That's why it was decided that Venom was the best choice, because he was hard to hit and would not be killed instantly. "Although, it might take several hundred years to revive if I die. I seriously hope that doesn't happen." Venom's nerves sharpened as he thought about this. Bernie and his friends also understood that Venom was really desperate. That's why they were in no hurry to join up with him. The role of the minutes was to distract Arios with a series of big moves. It didn't matter if it worked or not, the goal was to keep the attack going. "Offense is the best defense," as the saying went, and Venom was able to get around well because of minutes. Bernie used cognitive inhibition to contain Arios' power and keep the influence of Punishment King Sandalphone small, though not completely. This also made Minutes' attacks more effective. Of course, Jiwoo also acted as a second shield, attacking at key points, and making sure that Minutes could move freely. Jiwoo had become a true trump card. Unlike Arios, Jiwoo's concealment was of a nature that only Jiwoo herself could hide from. But that was enough. Needless to say, it would come in handy in battle. The diminutive Jiwoo activated her skill the moment she was out of Arios' sight. Then, when Arios was caught completely off guard, she unleashed a fatal blow. Unfortunately, Arios was not weak enough to be defeated by such a blow, but even so, the damage was steadily accumulating. Each player's role had its own meaning, and Masayuki's lucky field was the perfect combo to make this happen. Arios, who had underestimated his opponent's superiority, found himself unknowingly in a tight spot. "It can't be, I'm being pressured." While he was feeling disgusted, the situation was worsening in earnest. He was at their mercy, unaware of this as time continued passing by. If he continued like this, he would incur the wrath of Feldway. Aware of this, Arios lost his cool and became increasingly impatient. Reiner was rolling on the ground, screaming. but no one wanted to help Reiner. Currently, Hinata had defeated Reiner, but Feldway was still alive. Vielgrind was dealing with him, but as long as the castle guard was in place, her attacks wouldn't work. As for Reiner's subordinates, Moss and Cian were already holding them off. It was a surprisingly comfortable fight. Moss was restraining them, Cian was bringing them into a one-on-one situation, and Nicholas was supporting them. He helped Cian by using magic to stop the enemy's movements, giving them an advantage in the battle. Arios had no time to spare either. That's why none of the Feldway forces had time to worry about Reiner. Rather, it would be more correct to say that they would not care even if they did. As proof of this, Viga, the one who had been asked for help, was smirking as he dealt with Testarossa. Is it okay if you don't help your friend? Ha! He's a minion, not a friend. But you have a point. Perhaps it's about time. Testarossa had a bad feeling when she heard Viga's comment. This person, he's up to something. Testarossa had noticed that Viga had been using the corpses to recover from the damage so far. But she had a feeling that he was hiding more than that. That feeling was correct. You're the one who's misunderstanding. I still haven't taken things seriously. It seems that you're trying to figure out how to kill me, but you won't need to worry about that. What do you mean? Ha! You're even dumber than I thought. I'm telling you that you're no match for me. Upon hearing this, Testarossa was about to become furious. However, she stopped and observed Viga with a cold gaze. This person, he appears to be gaining strength little by little even during the current battle. I wonder if this arrogant attitude is not just a bluff? She saw through this and refrained from acting out in anger. Viga then declared to Testarossa. Feldway-san should be getting impatient by now. All right then, I'll show you my best shot, so you can die in despair. Viga said as such and laughed loudly. And then he unleashed the power he had just learned to use. It was the beginning of the nightmare. Awaken, evil dragon spawn. Viga ignored Testarossa and put his hands on the ground. It was a production. There was really no need for him to do so, but he dared to act in a flawed manner to show that Testarossa was no match for him. Testarossa would not be fooled. She was prepared to calmly analyze what was about to happen. From the palm of Viga's hand, a wave of evil gushed forth. It traveled through the earth, engulfing Reiner's subordinates as they fell to the ground. Those who were already dead and those who were still alive were equally affected. However, he just managed to avoid Elric. Moss. Gather everyone. Moss moved in response to Testarossa's voice. He called Bernie and the others back to Masayoki's location to protect them from Viga's wave. Venom and Cian were no exception, and they all gathered in one place. They watched with bated breath as the situation unfolded. Before their eyes, the living and the dead began twisting together. Then they transformed into an evil life form that emitted a foul odor. Reiner was no exception. Hey. Brother Viga. Help me, I too am, in this sludge. Reiner was in pain, but was still desperately calling out to Viga for help. But Viga only grinned at Reiner. Reiner had been a pawn from the beginning. Therefore, he could experiment with his new power without any hesitation. Oh, brother. Rest assured. If you're useful to me, I will help you as often as I can. Ah, really? Viga's grin deepened to a wide smile, as if to reassure Reiner. Reiner, who was relieved to see this, was then attacked by the sludge made from the melted corpses. Seeing this, Ario's face turned pale. Hey, Viga. Why you're not going to use me as your test subject, are you? Viga sneered. I'm gonna do this. Be bastard. I will never forgive you. Just because you're the leader of the Seven Angels doesn't mean that you can get away with such tyranny. Arios was furious, but his lower half had already been swallowed up by the sludge. Feldway Summer. Please help. Viga is out of control. At this rate, I will. Alas, Arios' desperate pleas were silently ignored by Feldway. It wasn't because he was having trouble dealing with Veelgrind, but rather because he simply wasn't interested. Besides, he didn't see the need to stop a useless person from being strengthened. Damn it. Arios also sank into the sludge, leaving behind a scream. And now it was ready. The corpses melted and twisted together, and the sludge formed into several humanoid forms. At this moment, a fearsome creature was born into the world. It was a reappearance of the dead birthday that produced undead elves with Viga's power. Of course, the effect was not the same. That was the true value of the organic domination and mass reproduction from Viga's ultimate skill, Evil Dragon King Azidahaka. In Viga's words, it was evil dragon spawn production, it was the power to create evil lifeforms to be his loyal subjects. There were 4 evil dragon spawns born in total. Although they resembled human beings, their appearance was nothing short of hideous. The evil dragon spawn's entire body was covered with black scales that were transformed from mythical grade material. On their bellies were a large rift, reminiscent of a mouth with teeth. On their backs, there were 2 pairs of the blackened wings of a bird of prey. They appeared to be the remnants of an angel. The heads of the creatures were distinctive, with a smooth mass from the neck up. There were 2 hollow-like holes in them, and red eyes glittered in the blackness. They were no longer people. They were writhing beings with the presence of evil. They had no heads to begin with, so there was no light of intelligence in their eyes. Nevertheless, they seemed to have the power of judgment, and were glaring hatefully at Hinata and Venom, perhaps influenced by the hatred they had felt before their deaths. Gwahahahahaha. What do you think of my lovely pets? It seems that you small fry have been working hard, but that's all over now. These evil dragon spawns are far too powerful for little peons like you, so enjoy them to your heart's content. Viga said, laughing loudly. And then, while crossing his arms, he ordered, "Go play with them." Although evil dragon spawns were a distorted life form, they were still very capable of fighting. They had no eyes, but that was no problem since they had magic perception to begin with. They could accurately grasp the situation around them and act according to orders. The individual existence values reached 2.4 million. This was more than the average insect general, so one could understand how much of a threat these evil dragon spawns were. Of course, that was obvious to those who were facing them, without needing to be explained. Whoa, seriously. Venom muttered. He felt that they were in serious trouble. It had been tough even against Arios, but these 4 additions were out of the question. It was only thanks to Masayuki that the battle had been manageable, but these evil dragon spawns seemed unlikely to be able to use any kind of battle tactics. Emotion had both good and bad aspects. The prideful Arios was too impatient to show his true strength. Masayuki's lucky field had been one of the factors that contributed to bringing out the worst in him. This time, however, such factors had been eliminated. The creature's lack of intelligence may work to their advantage, but for the evil dragon spawns, whose only remaining assets were their offensive instincts and unparalleled fighting sense, there seemed to be no inconveniences just by being a fighting machine. Venom sensed this intuitively. This will be very dangerous if we don't take things seriously. Hinata spoke, breaking out in a cold sweat. The evil dragon spawns were dangerous, that's what Hinata's survival instincts were telling her. Even Hinata's phantom pain could not penetrate the black scales that covered their outer skin. The only possible openings were the eyes and the mouth on the belly, but Hinata judged that there was little hope for that either. That was why she told the holy knights, who had gathered one after another. Attention, all holy knights below the rank of captain. Keep a large distance from the target and get information. Do not let that evil being escape from this place, and do not let that Viga accumulate any more power than he already has. Isolate this area with a barrier. At this order, the holy knights that had arrived reacted immediately. For some reason, the monsters that had been rampaging all over the place suddenly melted into the ground. In order to find out the cause, they had come to the center of the disaster, where the unimaginable situation had occurred. Seeing the evil dragon spawn, which was clearly beyond their control, the holy knight's morale was about to drop. However, Hinata's shout gave them a purpose and revived their fighting spirit. That's right. Let us do what we can do for now. Cardinal Nicholas nodded broadly. Understood, Hinata-sama. Fritz nodded. Well, this is just going to cost us more lives. Ritace did not disagree. She was scared, but she couldn't just escape either. Leave it to me. We'll show you the results of our training here. Bacchus laughed. Everyone knew that he was in a state of false cheerfulness, but the sound of his laughter seemed to give them energy. Well then, let's go. Arno shouted at the end, bringing everyone together. Everyone nodded their heads in agreement. They would not give up just because the enemy was out of control. If they ran away now, their futures would remain bleak. Cardinal Nicholas and the 4 captains of the Holy Knight Order were leading. Following them, the members of the Holy Knight Order began to act in accordance with several training patterns. They scattered in 5 directions around the square, forming a 5-pointed star. Then, they constructed an isolation barrier with everyone's combined power. This time, although the enemy was evil, they did not use magicules as their energy source. Rather, although magicules were also energy, the enemy had taken in other powers, so the effect of the holy purification barrier was expected to be limited. In fact, considering the presence of the monsters in this barrier, it was judged that they may be a hindrance to it. Therefore, Hinata's choice was to use material area, which aimed to completely isolate this place from the rest of the world. Hinata's choice was supported by Testarossa. That's great. Cian, Venom, you guys should help as well. If we don't reinforce the barriers even a little, they'll seek out bait beneath the ground. That bait was the evacuated residents of Royal Capital. Testarossa had hypothesized about Viga's abilities with some accuracy from his previous attacks. As long as it was within the influence of Viga's power, any organic matter could be used as food for Viga. So far, it had only been overlooked because it was ineffective, but there was no telling when the slaughter would start in order to recover the damage. That possibility was the reason why Testarossa was holding back her attack. You guys should help as well. Veilgrind ordered Minutes and the others. But we have His Majesty. With me here, there's no way anyone will be laying a finger on Masayuki. If you understand that, then get out of here. Understood. Minutes, Bernie, and Ji-woo were also dispatched to help maintain the material area. Thus, only the strongest remained in the area. Confronting Feldway was Veilgrind. Still facing Viga was Testarossa. In the form of a boy, was Moss. Having been revived, was Hinata, and just standing there with his arms crossed, was Masayuki. As mentioned, these were the 5 members of the group. Why am I even still here? There was one person who still had questions, but no one offered a helping hand or even a suggestion. And finally, the situation had changed. Go play with them. With a single order from Viga, the 4 evil dragon spawns began to move in unison at a furious pace. Obeying orders, they kicked off the ground, flew through the air, and pounced on the prey they had set their sights on. Chapter 4. The Gathering of the Giants. As I faced Michael, I was in the biggest pinch of my life. I feel like I'm always in these kinds of situations, but this time it was for real. Michael's unexplainable attack had defeated even Diablo, and there was nothing I could do about it, to be honest. The only reason I could afford to be like this was because Veldora was waiting for me in the labyrinth. As long as Veldora was safe, I could be resurrected. More importantly, are things really okay? Not a problem, but if you're worried, you just have to not lose. You're right about that. Seal-san's argument was so correct that it was difficult to respond to it. If I could do that in the first place, I wouldn't have any troubles at all, which is why I'm worried and anxious. It's okay. I wondered if something like this might happen, so I have already taken steps to deal with this situation. Will you take immediate action? Hey, what? I haven't heard anything, but you've already taken action? I don't know why you're trying to deceive me, or rather, you can't deceive me, so you're doing it on purpose. Apologies. Well then, while we're at it, you would like to activate emergency response mode? When you say, you would instead of would you, I'm guessing that means you're ready to activate it. Well, that's fine. It's Seal-san, so things won't go bad. Apparently, there was a way out of this, and I like to think that there was still some hope. I will do my best to meet your expectations. Perhaps realizing that I was convinced, Seal-san's motivation seemed to have been ignited. I had no idea how this would affect it. If so, I should just take action instead of worrying. There's no other answer anyway. In that case, let's just attack. It wasn't that I was going to give up and try my best until the end, but rather that I was feeling quite at ease. I would do everything I could with the intention of gathering information for the next battle. I didn't want this experience to go to waste, even if I had to throw it away. I was risking my life, and I wanted to get as much useful information as I could out of it. With that in mind, I readied my sword. But it seems that I was too naive. I commend you for not despairing. However, you are no match for me. The moment I heard Michael's supercilious remark, I stopped moving. No, it wasn't just me who stopped. The whole world had stopped. I remember this feeling. I knew it. What? As seen with the attacks that defeated Diablo, Sue, and Leon earlier, this phenomenon is the same as the one that Guy Crimson and Chloe Orbert once activated. Could it be that the déjà vu pattern I experienced was the correct answer? That's correct. This is definitely a time stop. Huh? We can't win like that. That's a foul. It may be acceptable in manga or anime, but in real life, that's just shocking. Those who cannot reach the suspended world are no match for those who can, no matter how strong they are. It seems that I was right in recognizing that. In fact, there was nothing I could do. Well, of course Diablo would lose. I thought I could never imagine him losing, but I guess it's inevitable when the enemy can stop time. Yup, time to disband. Already, I have honestly accepted my defeat. Time has already stopped now, right? How are we even having this conversation? Thanks to the emergency response mode, we can now recognize the suspended world. Seriously? As expected of Seal-sensei. The report was a bit smug, but I can forgive it now. Rather, I'm very grateful. I was relieved to know that things were going to work out, but it seems that I was mistaken. It was only when I saw that Michael's sword was approaching that I realized it. I rushed to deal with it, but my body would not react at all. Being able to recognize the suspended world did not mean that I could move in it, which, when I thought about it, was only natural. I thought I would be able to do something because Seal-san was so smug. Well, I didn't manage to do anything about it in the first place, so it wasn't my place to complain. It was a bit of a blessing in disguise, but oh well. Even if I gave up and let Michael cut me down, I would at least like to remember his sword line and fighting habits for the next time. No, it's too early to give up. I was about to give up, but Seal-san calmed me down. And in the next moment, I felt that a clear sound was echoing in my ears. I remembered this sound, and I even felt a sense of familiarity. At that time, it was definitely Rimuru-sensei, I'm here to help. That's right, it was Chloe. While I was helpless against Michael's sword, her long black and silver hair swept in front of me as if it was scattering silver light around me. In her hand was the Moon Mistress, and she was cloaked in divine spirit armor. The Moonlight Saber and the Holy Spirit armor entrusted to her by Hinata had undergone a long journey to reach the mythical grade level. The wielder was, of course, the beautifully grown hero Chloe. Well, Chloe had come, but I still remained motionless. In other words, it was impossible to reply to her. No problem. It turns out that information particles are unaffected by time or space and can transmit information to any point in time. This means that they can transmit thoughts even in a suspended world. Is that so? The conversation between me and Seal-san was happening instantly. However, the voice I heard from Chloe had a slight time difference. The reason for this remained unknown though, right? If the information particle was unaffected by time and space, then wouldn't it make sense that communication would be instantaneous as well? I am a part of Master, so I am not affected by time at all. However, if you want to know what's going on outside in the suspended world, an information particle needs to be flown out to grasp the information of the surroundings. That's hard to explain. In short, the information particle is not affected by space-time, so it can move in any situation. That's why, by interfering with the information particle as a substitute for magicules, you can maintain your vision and transmit your thoughts. In other words, interfering with the information particle was not enough to move in this situation. Chloe seemed to be talking normally, but I guess we shouldn't confuse her with the real world. I thought that she was using thought acceleration, but it seems that this was not the case. Apparently, we were just exchanging information particles with no time lag, and it was possible because we shared the same soul. In that case, if I wanted to communicate my intent to a third party in this suspended world, you can imprint your will on the information particle and hit the other person. This may sound rough, but I understood it well. Seal-san could now interfere with the information particle, so it's possible to reply. In the first place, the reason why I could see what was going on around me now was because I was reflecting the information particles. I wondered whether or not the speed of the information particles was constant in this suspended world, but I was glad to hear that the conversation was established. Sorry, you saved me. But I don't seem to be able to move yet, so I immediately sent my intent to Chloe. Then Chloe responded with telepathy net to match me. Yeah, I know. Rather, you can use telepathy net now, can't you? Well, sort of. That's right, Rimuru-san has Seal with him. It's no wonder he can do this. Oh, so Chloe knows Seal-san too? Yes. Through Chronoa, my existence was revealed. That's why she secretly took on the role of an escort this time. Ah, that made sense. So that was the trump card that Seal-san was hiding. Or rather, if it had gone this far, it must have guessed that things were too dangerous. Yes. I hadn't been able to fully determine the enemy's objective, but I was certain that they were targeting Masaaki Honju. Similarly, I guessed that Master was also a likely target. Ho ho, so you're saying that I was used as bait? That was a rare decision for Seal-san, who always played things too safe. Huh? Are you saying that the double check from that time? Yes. It was a metaphor for Michael, who thought he had the upper hand on Master. Damn it, I've been beaten. I'm ashamed that I didn't notice. At that time, it felt like Seal-san was stalling. My answer was not wrong, but it was not right either. It was because I wasn't sure whether to point it out or not. I thought that Michael would naturally assume that Master would go to Leon to bring him back to his senses. In that case, it was expected that he would use Leon as bait, so I wondered how much importance Michael would place on this, and how much force he would put into it. So that's how it was. No, it made sense when you thought about it. I had already brought Veilgrind back to her senses. Michael and Feldway were not so stupid as to think that Veilgrind had come back on her own. It turned out that my thinking had been too shallow. Michael would have been wary of us getting Leon back and would have done something about it. Rather than worrying about Leon, he thought of a way to take advantage of the situation. In other words, Michael's plan was to use Leon as bait to lure me out. And Seal-san had planned this plan in anticipation of that. There was no room for me to intervene. It may sound simple when explained, but both of them had been thinking 2 or 3 moves ahead, and even the slightest deviation in the course of events could have led to a catastrophic failure. No, perhaps that was why. If I hadn't come here, Michael would have taken a different approach, so it was easier for Seal-san to read the situation by pretending to be fooled. My safety is guaranteed when Veldora is around, so it decided that it would be better for me to go along with Michael's plan. Yes. Of course, Master's safety was given the utmost consideration. I'm sure it was. It's scary that it was all going according to plan, but what even Seal-san didn't calculate was that Michael also had the time-stop ability. That was also considered as a possibility, so I negotiated with Chloe Orbert and asked her to be on standby just in case. I see, so you guessed that Chloe would not enter the battle. But because Michael was too strong, I ended up being saved by Chloe. Even Seal-san couldn't foresee the situation, so there was nothing for me to do. Michael's ability to handle time stop was the biggest miscalculation. However, it turned out to be a good thing in the end. Why is that? Because there are very few people who can handle this ability. It is a very valuable experience. It was fortuitous that we succeeded in developing the emergency response mode. If we observe the suspended world in this way, it will only be a matter of time before we are able to move. That confidence is as strong as ever. It was only a matter of time, so I guess it was a losing battle to argue while time was stopped. I feel like I'll be judged otherwise, so I'll just praise you for this. The question was whether I could actually move when time was stopped. If I couldn't do that, there would be no talking about it in the future, so it was our urgent task to solve this problem. For now, I had to rely on Chloe. At any rate, there was nothing I could do right now. In all seriousness, I've decided to wait and see how the battle between Chloe and Michael goes. Michael did not move, perhaps because he was wary of Chloe's appearance. But finally, he lifted the sword in his right hand with a swaying motion. To be honest, it's hard to believe that something so unexpected happened. Is that so? I didn't realize that there were others besides Velzard and I who could move in this stopped time. Aside from Monas, the ultimate being such as myself, I don't know how you could have reached this realm. Whoa, Michael himself said the word Monas just now. Was this a trick? If Chloe reacted, he seemed to be hoping to get closer to her true identity. I was a little worried and thought about advising Chloe, but there was no need. Is that so? It was surprisingly easy. Chloe just brushed it off. Seeing her response made me remember. Although I couldn't help but think of her as my own student, Chloe was a great warrior in her own right. After a long journey through time, she had reigned as the strongest hero. She also had a Monas named Chronoa, so I didn't have to worry about her. Stop laughing. The Hope King Sariel response has disappeared from you. Are you willing to answer why? I knew it. I had thought that Michael might be able to detect the angelic ultimate skills, but now it was confirmed. And the fact that the response was gone meant that Chloe had successfully sublimated the Hope King Sariel and turned it into her power. I didn't even need to help her. It's very disappointing. I suppose it is. To the skill maniac Seal-san, Chloe's skill must have been drool-worthy. If it had been able to find out the secret, we would have been able to move in the suspended world by now. No, rather than Chloe being stingy, I think Seal-san was too much of a fool. Is there any reason for me to tell you that? No, not really. Michael didn't seem to be expecting an answer either and silently repositioned his sword. In that case, I must eliminate the uncertainty. I agree. I'll make you regret making me your enemy. After that conversation, the battle between Chloe and Michael began. The battle was, in a word, tremendous. As it turned out while watching the battle, the speed of the information particle was constant. Conversation had been established and the reaction speed of vision was also constant. This was as clear a physical phenomenon as the fact that all things cannot exceed the speed of light. In that case, why did the information particles exceed the speed of light? This was not a matter of the speed being exceeded. It was as if the information particles, which were supposed to be at different coordinates, were transferring information to each other with zero time difference. Regardless of how far they were from each other, as long as the information particles existed in the recognizable space, there was no time difference. In other words, an information particle transcended time and space. Our communication had also been established by using the information transfer between information particles. In that case, how can one move? Could it possibly be? If it is a spiritual life form, then they must have transformed all matter into information particles, thereby resulting in a digital life form. I knew it. Assuming that the mind and spirit are also information, it's not impossible. Whether it could be done or not was another matter, but it is significant that there was an answer there. I should have eliminated the thought I couldn't do it and instead concentrated on how I could get there. You're right. We'll make the emergency response mode even more fully operational, and aim to evolve into a digital lifeform. Is that okay? Of course, Seal-kun. I'll leave it all to you, so please do as you like. That's what I profusely ordered. Because nothing could be done if we didn't, and if there was a possible countermeasure, we should try everything. Seal-san understood my intentions correctly and energetically started its activities. All that remained was to wait for the results. I was still concerned about the fact that I was leaving everything to others, but it couldn't be helped anymore. I made up my mind and focused on the battle between Chloe and Michael. Now then, Chloe and Michael were quite close in terms of their abilities. I couldn't tell exactly, so I was just making inferences, but I thought that they were evenly matched in terms of physical ability. Or perhaps I should say that they were evenly matched in their ability to interfere with the information particles. Since the speed had a fixed maximum value, it was one's power of interference that determined superiority or inferiority. The key point was how well one could control the information particles and outperform the enemy. That would be the decisive factor in a suspended world, I guessed. There were a few more things that I noticed while observing. First, there was no concept of defense in the suspended world. Those who could move, such as Chloe and Michael, could interfere with each other's information particles to form a unified offensive and defensive battle. On the other hand, those who could not move would be attacked without being able to take any defense. Moreover, the fact that time was stopped meant that all the forces were not working. Intermolecular forces such as star attraction and repulsion would not work, and there were no binding forces. There was no inertia and no external factors, so an object retained its original state. In that case, what would happen if something was attacked in this state? The answer was simple: it would collapse in an instant. Whether it was a reinforced concrete wall, a solid bedrock, or a lump of steel, there was no resistance because the atoms were not even bonded to each other. There was nothing in this world that could endure. That was the conclusion. A world in which all the laws of physics do not apply was a terrifying thing when I thought about it. I wouldn't know what would happen, and if I entered the world carelessly, I was likely to get severely harmed. Between those who could move in the suspended world and those who couldn't, there was a dimensional barrier that could never be overcome. With that in mind, I was surprised that Diablo and Sue had survived. Diablo seemed to have anticipated this and activated a magical defense barrier. Whoa, newsflash. Diablo's anticipation of this situation was amazing, but the fact that his magic was also effective in the suspended world was an unexpected bonus. However, you cannot activate magic while in the suspended world. You must prepare for it beforehand, and once its effect is broken, it's over. I see, so that's why he was safe. I wonder if that's what Michael meant when he said he should have finished them off. It was meant as a follow-up. Whoa, then what about Sue? Sue survived because he was a parallel existence. I believe he is still pretending to be beaten up, hiding in Master's shadow and looking for an opportunity to abruptly attack Michael. It didn't make much sense because time had stopped, that's what Seal-san explained to me. I had completely forgotten that he could now use parallel existence. In any case, Sue was very impressive. This was the only time I didn't think I'd be able to use him, but I thought to myself that he was really reliable under normal circumstances. And so, the first thing I noticed was that the suspended world had no concept of defense, but the other thing I noticed was that the person who activated the suspended world seemed to be at a disadvantage. I wasn't completely sure, but I didn't think I was wrong. It appeared that stopping time consumed a lot of energy. In that case, there was no point in suspending all the people who were able to move in the suspended world. This time, Michael chose not to release the suspended world because he didn't want me to join in. Not only that, but it seems that repeatedly stopping and deactivating it consumes more energy. I see. It's almost like an electrical appliance. In that case, perhaps Michael was not yet accustomed to time stop, and unknowingly deactivated it several times earlier? I'm sure of it. Anyone who can observe the suspended world would have noticed it as soon as someone activated the time stop somewhere. I understand what Seal-san is trying to say. Time was not something that flowed only in a limited space. It was the suspended world that affected time and space in all worlds. Ever since Guy and Chloe had fought briefly, I hadn't experienced the strange sensation I had felt at that time, the feeling that time had stopped. It was proof that, as Seal-san had said, no one had triggered the time stop. Well, it was a world that only a limited number of people could understand, but even so, this ability was surprisingly difficult to handle. It was useless if the other party could also use it. Wait, what? What happens if you aim for the moment your sword hits the opponent? That's what Guy and Chloe were doing when they were fighting. I see. I didn't realize it at the time, but those two had been fighting with unimaginable and transcendental skill. But that had just been a light test of skill, and the more I learned about them, the scarier they got. That means I have to be ready to respond at a moment's notice. Otherwise, I won't be able to compete with this level of combat. I'll make sure not to neglect my research as well. Please do. I had been feeling overwhelmed, but those words made me feel relieved. It felt truly reliable to have a partner, Seal-san, whom I could count on. While I was thinking about this, the battle was reaching its climax. Chloe and Michael were still competing against each other, but my fingertips twitched. And little by little, I felt my senses returning from all corners of my body. Your evolution into a digital lifeform will soon be complete. Seal-san's words were truly a gospel of victory. If it was a one-on-one battle, then I'd have the upper hand once I entered the fray. And that time would come. It's time for you to be destroyed, you clever little hero. That's my line. You bragged about being a monus, but that's nothing unusual. The psychological warfare had reached its climax. At this point, Chloe also revealed that she had Chronoa within her. Michael was upset by this, and it created a small opening. Chloe wouldn't let that go. Goodbye, your fate ends here. A cold gaze pierced Michael. Reveal all things as they should be. Reverse fate. Referring to the long and short hands of a clock, it accelerated the rotation in the opposite direction of the clock. Even in this suspended world, Chloe's skills were still intact. She didn't let us know it until the very end and played it as a decisive move. The effect was dramatic. Chloe had said to reveal all things as they should be, but that was not exactly what she meant. For Chloe, it was to change things into what you think you should be. Therefore, it was not a return. And as for Michael, who was hit by the reverse fate. What am I doing? Who am I? What am I? A hollow being inhabiting Rudra's body. A skill that had lost its master, lost its reason for being, and had gone mad to fill its emptiness. Its true identity was ultimate skill Justice King Michael, Rudra's body, which had been preserved by the effects of the skill, began to crumble because it couldn't withstand the excessive force it contained. Now that it had been turned back into a mere skill by Chloe's hands, it had no reason to maintain its host. In the face of this emptiness, Chloe spoke softly. If you've lost sight of where you should go, will you come with me? I thought, but I decided to keep quiet and watch. ! Just like me, Michael, no, rather, Justice King Michael, whose ego as a monus had faded and returned to mere skill, seemed to be puzzled by the proposal. Chloe's proposal was to let it choose between disappearing or staying in this world with Chloe as its master. There was no easy answer, and it seemed like Justice King Michael would disappear and time would start to move on, but at that moment, the voice of the world echoed in the suspended world. It is confirmed that the three elements of courage, hope, and justice have been gathered in the individual, Chloe Orbert. This fills in the missing elements of the ultimate skill Hope King Sariel, and begins the complete integration into the ultimate skill Spacetime King Yog-Sothoth. Successful, ultimate skill Spacetime King Yog-Sothoth has fully evolved into ultimate skill Spacetime God, Yog-Sothoth. it was already obvious that it had been super enhanced without being explained. Inside Chloe, the ultimate evolution had taken place without her even being aware of it. Chloe, are you okay? Yes. Rimuru-san, I feel like I've truly become one with Chronoa. Having seen the change in Chloe firsthand, I thought that it might be true. It was because I felt that her faint childishness had disappeared, and that she had now acquired a seductiveness that reminded me of an adult woman. Since this was a characteristic of Chronoa, I thought that perhaps. Smooch? Question mark. Yes? Sage Chloe, you, what are? Chloe kissed me out of the blue. I didn't know what I was saying, but Chloe's beauty had suddenly approached me, and then I suddenly felt a soft touch on my lips. There was nothing I could do to stop it. There was no need to verify whether it could have been avoided or not. Oofufu, I'm an adult now. That's true, I admitted. But even so, I don't think you should take people by surprise like that. Well, it's a good thing that it was me, but wouldn't it be a problem if it was Leon? I'm fine with it, I am. And just like that, I made excuses to no one. However, why would Chloe suddenly kiss me? Wasn't that something Rimuru-san needed? I just felt like it, you know? Even if you say it in such a cute way, wait, what do you mean I needed it? Tisk, what a clever form of bribery. I received the remnants of Hope King Sariel from Chloe. I'm sure that there were other ways to do this, so I'll be more vigilant against surprise attacks in the future. Did you just click your tongue? Or rather, you don't really have to be so vigilant. I will keep a close watch. Yes. I wasn't sure why, but it felt like I shouldn't disobey anymore. I think it's better to let Seal-san do what it wants, so I decided to change the subject and cover it up. So then, now that you're talking about becoming one with Chronoa, does that mean Chloe can't return to her child form? Oh, that's still okay, she could change her appearance at will, from a baby to an old woman. Whether that made any sense or not, I was relieved that I wouldn't have to startle Kenya and the others. Okay, I'm going to release the time stop. Taking over from Michael, it seemed that Chloe was now in control of stopping time. She did it as naturally as if she was breathing. It was hard to imagine how much stronger she had become. Even without the assistance of a Monas, she seemed to be able to control her powers to the fullest. At the very least, I didn't need to be told that she was better than me who just relied on Seal-san. Okay, this is not the time to be so impressed. Before that, just one thing. I think, probably after this. Yeah, I understand. I'm pretty sure the amount of power I absorbed was less than expected. Got it. Then leave it to me this time. And you, take it easy and get some rest. And so, I strongly cautioned Chloe. Even though Chloe appeared to be fine, there was no way she could be safe after evolving so rapidly. I had to make sure she got a good rest, whether she wanted it or not. Yufu, I'm glad you're worried about me. I won't be fooled. Even if she smiles at me in such a cute way, I'm not like Leon. It was time for me to show my dignity as an adult. All right. I'll be quiet for a little while then. So, you won't lose, right? Of course. Thanks to Chloe, I understand the concept of time. Fufu, that's right. I promised Chloe I would win. Well, I wasn't going to admit it even if I lost, so it wouldn't be a lie. And so, Chloe released the time stop, and the world began to move once more. I was stopped in time while confronting Michael, but for those who couldn't recognize it, it must have seemed as if Michael suddenly disappeared, and Chloe had appeared. Specifically, Sue hurriedly spoke to me through telepathy net. Rimuru-sama, I apologize. I lost sight of the enemy. It's okay, but don't come out yet. Understood! That was all Sue needed to know. He was the best of the best, so it helped to talk fast, and then I began to play innocent. Oh hey, Chloe. Thanks for coming to save me. He almost got me. Fufu, Rimuru sounds not a very good actor, huh? Shut up. I'm honest at heart, so I'm just not good at deceiving anyone. That's enough. No more cheating. Chloe, you should go back and relax. Okay. I'll trust you, then. After that, Chloe kept her promise to me and returned to Tempest. From here on, she would be in her room in the labyrinth, recovering from the after-effects of her rapid evolution. Then, I grinned towards the empty space. Come on out, you're hiding, aren't you? I thought my presence was perfectly concealed, so how did you notice? If he was asking me why, I'd have to say it was pretty obvious. In my case, it was a hunch. It was common knowledge that the moment you thought you won the battle was the moment when the opening was the largest. Therefore, I assumed that a parallel existence would be hidden during the battle. Or rather, it was something I definitely would have done. In my case, unlike Veelgrind and Sue, I was unable to split my consciousness, so I couldn't take such a measure, but if it were possible, I would have adopted such a strategy. I was sure that Michael would have prepared such a strategy. When I tried to advise Chloe with that in mind, she told me that Michael was using parallel existence. It was a part of Michael that Chloe had taken in. However, she received all the information on Justice King Michael, and by taking it in, she was able to find out Michael's plan. I was planning to wait for Michael to take me by surprise, but I decided not to bother. I figured I should just beat him head on and end his stupid ambitions. I see. Just because you've read my thoughts, doesn't mean you saw through my skills. But even so. Michael spoke to me, looking slightly surprised. I didn't think you'd be able to defeat my parallel existence. Well, yeah. Though it wasn't me, but that girl. Hero Chronoa. I underestimated how far she had come. It's not Chronoa, but Chloe. Well, you're done here anyway, so there's no need to correct you. I said as such, lightly loosening my body. It had been a while since I had fought with all my might. Just to make sure, I would do some preparatory exercises. What nonsense. How dare you bark at me when you've only been hiding behind the hero? That's one way to look at it. But you know, Chloe was my student. If I don't show her some dignity as a teacher, I'll lose my standing, won't I? I replied, but Michael just gave me a cold stare with no expression. The look on his face told me that he didn't understand me. Well, from the perspective of someone who could stop time, I probably wasn't important. But that was before. Demon Lord Rimuru, you have a bad memory. I taught you that you were an obstacle, but not an enemy. You should learn your lesson and leave this world quickly. Are you saying I should die? Obviously, I don't want that. Don't tell me what to do, just come and get me. As soon as I finished saying that, time stopped. Michael's sword closed in on me with a look of victory on his face. But alas, I, too, had made this suspended world my own. Even in this soundless world, I could hear the echoing clashes of swords and blades. It can't be, you. I've learned how to move in a suspended world. I shouted and faced Michael with a different expression. I saw Michael as an enemy. It was the same for Michael. He recognized me as an enemy to be defeated, and his condescending attitude disappeared. And then This time, in the truest sense of the word, we faced each other with the fate of the world at stake. Veelgrind was in dire straits. She had said she would protect Masaiki no matter what, but Feldway was not so naive as to allow her to do so. I've been made a fool, haven't I? Veelgrind, are you going to take me with one hand? Yes. Unlike you, what is that presence? Feldway, who had been on the defensive until now, unleashed the power he had been hiding before Veelgrind. It was just as powerful as Veelgrind's, no, it was even greater. You probably thought that you had parallel existence anyway, but I can use it too. If you're planning to go help Masaiki, I'll do my best to stop you. Tisk, you still have that disgusting personality. I hate you. Is that so? That's a shame. Veelgrind frowned when she heard Feldway's curt reply. In the ancient past, Feldway had been a lieutenant for her brother Veldenava, who had also complained to Veelgrind. Remembering that time, Veilgrind became even more irritated. Besides, the reality of the situation was harsh. Veilgrind had her hands full just dealing with Feldway, and Testarossa, who was the most reliable, was facing Vega herself. In that case, there were not enough allies to go against the 4 evil dragon spawns. I guess I underestimated Feldway too much. Was it a mistake to leave those 3 out? No, it would have been impossible to maintain the material area otherwise. Without minutes, Bernie, and Ji-woo, the strength of the material area would have been weakened. In that case, there would be no way to stop Vega from forcefully rooting into the ground and feeding on the evacuated people of the royal capital for energy. Therefore, Veilgrind's orders were not wrong, but she was worried that she might have made the wrong choice because she cared about Masayuki the most. The only people who could protect Masayuki were Moss, Testarossa's confidant, and the saint, Hinata. She didn't think they'd be able to stop the 4 evil dragon spawns, so Veilgrind's mind grew impatient. By the way, to take on 3 at the same time, you can't do it. I appreciate your understanding, but can you please stop looking at me like you're disappointed? I'm trying my best too. She could hear the conversation between Hinata and Moss, which made her worry even more. Hinata and Moss were each restraining 2 of them. But that was the best they could do, and it didn't look like they could defeat them. In fact, this was a pretty good fight. They were only just able to deal with evil dragon spawn because they had little experience in fighting them, and the 2 of them were outmatched in terms of combat ability. It would be absurd to expect more than this. And Testarossa as well. The material area is finally complete. So what? It means that I can now destroy you without restraint. It was all well and good until she told him so and launched her onslaught. But after that, Vega's indestructibility made it difficult to fight him. Testarossa's skill level was by far the highest. Despite the fact that Vega's existence value was several times greater, he was not an unbeatable opponent. And yet, Vega had evolved in the middle of the battle. He had eaten Arios and gained his power. And now, something happened that made things worse. Unbeknownst to Testarossa and the others, Michael's time stop had been activated. Veilgrind and Testarossa were the only ones who felt confused by the discomfort. Both of them immediately realized what had just occurred. Even if they panicked after time began to move again, everything would already be over. Because they understood that, the 2 of them did not panic. However, there was just a small opening. And to that extent, Masayuki's lucky field should have been able to overcome it. However, when she felt the strange sensation for the 4th time, something happened to Masayuki. Huh? Masayuki fell to his knees on the spot. He was exposed to sudden dizziness, but at that point, the effects of his power had disappeared. Masayuki? Veilgrind's worried voice rang out. Hiya ha ha. You shouldn't look away from me. And then Vega attacked, taking advantage of Testarossa's opening. Hinata and Moss were in a difficult situation as well, because the good luck had worn off when they had already been struggling. Masayuki's collapse was enough to put them all in a desperate situation. Then came the worst moment of all. Veilgrind's attention turned to Masayuki, and she exposed an opening that she shouldn't have. Feldway was not so naive as to let this go unnoticed. It's my victory. Feldway shouted, his sword piercing Veilgrind's chest. Masayuki could not comprehend the reality of what was happening before his eyes. The woman who smiled fearlessly, confidently, and always took care of herself no matter what the situation was kneeling on the ground, holding her chest. This was something that should not have happened. Feldway was an outrageous monster, and he was no match for him, and if Grin-san had been defeated, there was nothing he could do but run away, but he didn't care about that. Masayuki reconsidered what his heart was feeling and looked once more. Intense rage. From the top of his head to the tips of his toes, he found himself feeling a rage running through his entire body, threatening to burst out. Bastard, what the hell are you doing? A quieter voice than expected spilled out of Masayuki's mouth. Feldway reacted to it. You're the real deal, but just wait a minute. In any case, I'll destroy Veilgrind once and for all here. He couldn't finish his sentence. I asked you what the hell you were doing to my woman. 70. This was because Masayuki had stepped in at an unnoticeable speed and struck Feldway in the side with his rapier. This gem had been forged by Kurobi's hands, mainly to reduce weight and increase strength, and was a unique grade product. However, there was no way he could just carelessly hit an enemy protected by mythical grade armor and be safe. The weapon was shattered into pieces by the blow. But Masayuki didn't care. Ignoring Feldway, who took a step back in surprise, he picked up Veilgrind. Masayuki? You're safe now, so don't worry. No, it can't be. I'll take care of the rest. Rest well, Grin.71. Ah. Tears spilled from Veilgrind's eyes. That name was a nickname from her beloved, and there was only one person in the world who knew it. Welcome home, Rudra. Yeah. It's only for a little while, but I'm back. And then, Rudra, who was inhabiting Masayuki, smiled. From here on, it was time for a counterattack. Feldway furrowed his brow in displeasure. Rudra? What kind of nonsense is that? Ha! Feldway, I'll be the one to deal with you, but it looks like the others are having a hard time too. I'll give them a hand. Come now, Gran, you too, Damrada. Spacetime flickered, as if in response to Rudra's call. Completely ignoring the material area, two figures were summoned there. Well. I've spent beautiful days with Maria, but you're a harsh master even after your death. Complained the first person summoned, a man with blonde rather than white hair. Then, with a sharp, eagle-like gaze, he smiled. Hinata, my unworthy apprentice. It's a pity that you, the most talented of all the people I've worked with, have yet to become a hero. When Hinata was told this, she was astonished to think of that person's name. It can't be, you're. I couldn't show you then, so I'll show you now. Let me see what you can do. Master Granbell? He was too young to be her master, but it was definitely Granbell Rosso. Granbell had returned to this land in his best, most powerful form. Come, Truth. Granbell called out to his beloved sword. The longsword Truth, which had been stored in subspace, appeared in Granbell's hand without losing its mythical grade glow, and the next moment, an overblade, casually sliced one of the evil dragon spawns into dust. No way. As if to ridicule Hinata's struggles, Granbell's victory was too easy. The man who had been called after Granbell knelt down before Rudra. Your Majesty, you have awakened from your long sleep, I am so very pleased. Rudra looked at Damrada in exasperation. You're stubborn, Damrada, did you always have that kind of personality? Ah, I missed you, my friend. I went through a lot of trouble because of you. Sorry. I don't remember, so I don't know. Yes, that's right. That's the kind of guy you are. I knew it. Damrada was indignant, but hot tears were flowing from his eyes. Don't cry, it was my fault. Not exactly, but that's good enough. You've kept your promise, so I'm satisfied. Even reincarnated, Rudra was still Rudra. Rudra, to whom Damrada had sworn his loyalty, had rejected the control of the demon lord and aimed to establish a unified nation, a world where everyone could live happily and harmoniously by their own hands. The establishment of a unified nation was his goal. However, due to a series of tragedies, Rudra lost sight of this dream, and his heart had become worn out. He regretted the days when he was powerless to do anything for his master, but now. In this boy named Masayuki, the former Rudra had been brilliantly manifested. The sight of his old master was enough to make Damrada happy. Is that so? I still feel like I'm in the middle of a dream. Well, dreams do come true if you don't give up, don't they? If it's me, yeah. Fufafu, if it's Rudra Summer, apparently. Well, I don't want to talk too long, and I don't want to lose to Gran either, so I'd better get going. Damrada, with a refreshing smile on his face, ended the conversation with Rudra. He then stood next to Moss with an unhurried gait. "The great demon that has tormented my empire for so long, how unsightly. Tisk, I've got my own problems at the moment." "Is that an excuse?" "Well, I'm not interested in hearing it." "You're back to your old self, I see." "Of course. I have always been Rudra's friend and His Majesty's loyal servant. I can't help but cut corners a bit while His Majesty is away." "We're not enemies now, but well, I guess that's fine," Moss said, shrugging lightly. Smiling back at Moss, Damrada took a step forward. "Now then, let's get this over with." As soon as Damrada said this, he crouched down into a cat-legged stance. Putting his weight on his right foot, he became one with the earth and performed a warp movement as if he were gliding across the ground. By a principle different from the ancient martial arts gait, Damrada's body moved forward like a cannonball. And then, just like that, he crossed paths with the evil dragon spawn. Holy Supreme Crumbling Fist. From the part of the body that was struck, Damrada's fighting spirit was transmitted to the entire body. There was no way to block it, and it disintegrated the entire spirit of evil dragon spawn. "I'm relieved to see you're still as good as ever." Moss complimented him, sounding really unhappy. "Then I guess it's your turn next." "Of course it is." Moss agreed, thoroughly unsatisfied to his core. Moss was reminded of his old troubles and bitter memories at the sight of his adversary still alive and well, but for now, he could only do what he had to do. Moss hated defeat. It was fine if he only lost, but he absolutely hated to be blamed for it by his horrible boss, Testarossa. That alone was unacceptable, so he focused on how to fight without losing. This time, he had judged that he could not win immediately. That's why he was trying to buy time, but if there was only one opponent, that was a very different story. "If it's only one, then I can win." While muttering to himself, he decided to show off his serious mode for the first time in a long time. He gathered the tiny clones that he had scattered in the air and returned to his true form. What emerged was a beautiful man with silver hair and blue eyes. He was the Grand Duke of Hell, second only to the Primordials. That was Moss. With the growth of his master Testarossa, Moss himself was growing more powerful every day. The value of his existence has surpassed the 1,079,397 EP reported to Testarossa, and he had now reached 1.5 million. Moreover, in his hands were a countless number of chakrams, the infinite loop. At the same time as Moss was evolving, the infinite loop had also reached the mythical grade level. The current Moss, who had completely taken in the power of the infinite loop, had reached an existence value of 2.5 million, surpassing that of the evil dragon spawns. If such a Moss were to get serious. "Now you die. Infinite Eater." As soon as Moss activated the technique, his body shuddered. He became transparent and fragmented, enveloping the evil dragon spawn. "Gugya?" Looking at Moss with emotionless eyes, and then finding himself unable to move, the evil dragon spawn was baffled by its inability to carry out its orders. But that would only be for a short time. Moss's attack was a dark magic that used his own body as a medium, and it also had the characteristics of a technique with the effect of his unique skill collector. Its effect was to absorb the same amount of energy as himself. In other words, the amount of magicule in Moss's body was directly converted into attack power, and although it had the disadvantage of not being able to be used again until the absorbed energy was sublimated, the Infinite Eater was his strongest attack at the moment. If he used it, he knew it would be useless for a while, so it couldn't be used in a crowded battle. Rather, it was a technique that was difficult to handle and had few uses, but in this case, it guaranteed Moss an overwhelming victory. That's still a hell of a move. I wonder how many of the generals have been eaten. I didn't use it much on the weak ones. Maybe you were in a hurry and got unlucky. In the first place, I don't want to hear that from someone who uses a poison that can corrupt the mind and slaughter demons. Just let it out. Damrada and Moss praised each other's performance in a way that looked as if they were trying to humiliate each other. Thus, Moss also won. And the last one left was Hinata, who was casually entrusted with the sword by Granbell. "Master, this is. You can have it. It is no longer of any use to me." With these words, Granbell gave truth to Hinata. Dot. Dot. The Granbell here was nothing more than a fictional entity with an actual body. In fact, the sword he had just given to Hinata had also been recreated and held in his hand. The ability to summon past champions in the form of entities of the same nature as digital lifeforms. This was the essence of the ultimate skill king of heroes that Masayuki had awakened. Minutes and Kalgurio had regained their power because of the influence of this skill. And now, this time, Masayuki's anger had unknowingly triggered the hero's beacon to become more powerful. Rudra, the oldest and strongest of the champions, was called upon. The timing was also good. Perhaps it was a coincidence, or perhaps it was an inevitability due to Masayuki's good fortune. When Michael's parallel existence was defeated by Chloe, the information of the physical body that had served as a substitute was on its way back to the heavens. As a result, all of them were called by Masayuki to be integrated. Now, Masayuki's ego as Rudra had become more apparent. And Rudra was able to use Veilgrin's powers as his own. Using Veilgrin's parallel existence as a basis, Rudra did the insane thing of giving temporary bodies to the champions summoned by Hero's Beacon. Granbell's new mythical grade-long sword was also created by borrowing Veilgrin's power. "You used my power again, didn't you? Is that bad?" "No, not at all. Everything I have is yours, Rudra." It was a show of their lovey-dovey coupleness, 72, but what they were doing was completely absurd. Masayuki's King of Heroes was an insane power that was the ultimate balance breaker. It was no wonder that Feldway's face twitched as he confronted him. Dot. Dot. Be thankful. This is a divine sword given to me by my master over there, Rudra Naska. It can't be compared with other dull swords. And since you're going to inherit it, you'll have to prove your merit. Granbell commanded Hinata. "My merit, you say? I will see if you're worthy of holding the sword inherited by a hero." Granbell nodded magnanimously to the confused Hinata. Now that Granbell had said that much, there was no way for Hinata to back down. In the first place, she was a self-proclaimed defender of humanity, and she was not the kind of person who would hesitate at this point. Then rest assured. The current me will not lose, even to my master. You sure are talking big when you're not even at the level of these old bones. Listen, and do not forget. It is the strength of our emotions that makes us who we are. Victory is not what's important. It is the better outcome that matters. The words of Granbell, who acted more for the future of humanity than for his own victory, were heavy. Hinata chewed them over. Yes, I understand. Just as she had entrusted her hope to Chloe, Granbell had entrusted his beliefs to Hinata. Hinata accepted it and looked forward. In her line of sight, she saw the last of the evil dragon spawns. Hinata was surprised as she tried to focus her consciousness. Her consciousness was changing more smoothly than usual, and the more she looked, the more the surrounding situation filled her brain. Despite this, the information was organized, and she was able to grasp the movements of evil dragon spawn as if she were holding it in her hand. The sword and the will that had been entrusted to her, those were what brought about the change in Hinata. Truth had recognized Hinata as its master and had unleashed her full power. As a result, the value of Hinata's existence was greatly increased. Furthermore, Granbell's words had washed away Hinata's worries. "It's a pity that you have yet to become a hero," that's what Granbell had said. Paradoxically, it was a declaration that Hinata could become a hero. In that is the case, I must live up to his expectations. The master, who was stricter than anyone else, had acknowledged Hinata. Her mood was uplifted. "I'll finish you in an instant," she said as such, bidding a final farewell to the evil dragon spawn. True slash. She didn't even let her opponent realize that it had been slashed. Countless slash marks appeared on the evil dragon spawn's body, and at that moment, its gaze crossed with Hinata's. Hinor, he, Hulp, 73. The evil dragon spawn was about to say something, but its words failed to come out. Before it could even finish, its body disintegrated into tiny pieces. Perhaps the remnants of Reiner's consciousness had asked Hinata for help, but if he had lost his human essence at this stage, there was no way to save him. This was Reiner's own fault, but... Have a good night. Sweet dreams. Hinata threw in a few words of comfort. There were many reasons why she did not like Reiner, and she didn't think she could forgive him for what he had done, but she hoped at the least that he would be at peace when he died. In this way, Hinata's victory was confirmed, and evil dragon spawns were annihilated. The victorious Hinata was greeted by Granbell with a round of applause. Well done. No, it was because my master lent me his sword. Granbell stopped Hinata from giving truth back to him. It is yours now. I am already dead. The me here is nothing more than a fake, a perfect reproduction created from memories. That's... It didn't look like it, but Hinata knew it was true. The boy who inherited my master's soul has created an extraordinary power. With that said, Granbell smiled. Hinata agreed. This was not a resurrection from the dead, but it was, if anything, an even more terrifying power. The ability to recreate the champions of the past in their prime. Even if the power was limited to those who had a relationship with Masayuki, it would still be an absurd story. Moreover, there was a strong possibility that he would be able to call upon even those who had no connection to him. At the very least, Granbell and Masayuki were not acquainted with each other. Even so, he was able to summon them because Hero Rudra, who was said to be a past life of Masayuki, had been Granbell's mentor. Even Hinata had only just heard of this story, and Masayuki should have known nothing about it. To begin with, it was unclear as to how many people could be summoned at the same time, and she had to admit that it was an unfathomable ability. It was only natural that Granbell, who stood here from Masayuki's power, had no regrets about the sword he was leaving behind in this world. Even so, Hinata was not sure that she was worthy to hold it. I understand that master is an illusion, but that's not the point. In the end, I couldn't become a hero. My qualifications were passed on to Chloe, and unfortunately, I was never meant to awaken. The hero's egg that Hinata carried had been passed on to Chloe to give birth to the strongest hero. Therefore, the current Hinata would never awaken, and could not live up to Granbell's expectations. Knowing this, Hinata showed off her current self to Granbell. Through this, one could see Hinata's strong will that she doesn't mind being disappointed. She was declaring to Granbell that she had nothing to be ashamed of. Granbell laughed at such a Hinata. Do you really think so? Eh? It was my master Rudra's will that I be called, but I suppose it was inevitable. I remembered from the promised land that I was unable to entrust you with my will either. Maria was very angry with me. This conversation itself was an illusion told by a fake. And yet, it was still so concrete and vivid. Then, Hinata realized the meaning of Granbell's words. Huh? This power is... Granbell's qualification as a hero, the holy spirit of light that guided those to victory, had been handed over to Hinata along with truth. This is where my role ends. Hinata, I'll leave the rest up to you. Granbell spoke, smiling with a freshness that had never been shown in his lifetime. Hinata vowed with that smile. Rest assured, master. I will do my best. Then, good. Granbell said and gave a small smile. Then he turned his back on Hinata, as if his business was done. Damrada stood alongside Granbell as he walked toward Masayuki. Gran, are you finished satisfying your regrets? Yes. You also seem to have complained to Rudra. He didn't listen to me, as usual. That's just like him. Yeah, definitely. The two of them appeared to be on good terms with each other. It made one think that this was the way things were in the ancient past, the way things should have been. No, it was the truth. Granbell had studied under Rudra and parted company to unite the West. After the West was united, he was scheduled to return to Rudra's service. Granbel's struggle with the monsters of power who dominated many nations had exhausted him greatly. The empire that he had set up as a virtual enemy eventually became a real threat to Granbel. And so, trapped in his own madness, he and his friend Damrida became nothing more than superficial friends who played tricks on each other, until today. Those petty ties were no longer relevant. Just like in the old days, they were simply laughing and talking to each other. Without a doubt, this was not something a mere illusion could do. Rudra was waiting for them. Hey, you guys aren't going to speak trash right in front of me, are you? You'd better prepare yourselves. We were complimenting you. Yes, that's right. We can't do anything without you. Tisk, you're making me sick. Well, that's fine then. It's my turn now, so get some rest until I call you back. Rudra laughed. Granbel and Damrida laughed back, and then disappear. They left, satisfied that their part in the story was over. Rudra, who was entrusted with the rest, accepted their trust without hesitation. Rudra, are you okay? Rudra smiled at Veilgrin's concern, hugged her around the waist, and even kissed her lightly. I don't think this is the time. Fufu, I'll be gone once this is over. I just got my reward first. Veilgrin stared at Rudra in ecstasy. She adored the naive Masayaki for his innocence, but Rudra, the man she had once loved, was exceptional. Someday, Masayaki would become Rudra. Veilgrin had always believed that, but she never thought that her dream would come true. It may seem contradictory, but those were her true feelings. Because she could love any Rudra, the original was the best. Masayaki, who recreated such a Rudra, had become a supreme being for Veilgrin. The word love was no longer enough. I love Masayaki. All of you, Rudra. I know. So those words shouldn't be said to me, but to Masayaki himself. But, that kid, he's a bit shy. I'm sure he's happy on the inside. I'm the one who said it, so I'm sure of it. Yes, those words were also true. The current Rudra was not an illusion, but Masayaki himself with Rudra's memories. Rudra then turned to Feldway as if to hide his embarrassment. Now then, sorry to keep you waiting, Feldway. Apparently, you're the real deal. Do you intend to defy the laws of this world and say that you've transcended death? No. I'm still dead and there's no coming back to life. However, I can hit a man from the other side if he makes the woman I love cry. Don't be silly. I'm serious though? Well, I haven't gone to the other side yet. Rudra's statement, though said in a joking manner, was quite true. Because he was dwelling within Masayaki like this, as long as Michael's body was still incarnated, not all of his memories would be recreated. As soon as the effects of Masayaki's power expired, Rudra's personality would disappear. However, his memories and experiences would remain in Masayaki's heart. This meant that Rudra could continue to manifest himself. Rudra was not so sincere as to tell him this, but he had no intention to hide it. Now then. Muttering to himself, Rudra glanced at Vega. Then, turning to Testarossa and Hinata, he gave them an order with an expectant look. Hey, you guys. I'll leave that small fry to you. Naturally, the two rebelled. So high and mighty. Agreed. However, it was in their best interest to follow Rudra's lead, and they were not so stupid as to not understand that. That's why it felt even worse, but in this case, they chose to follow him quietly. Let us go with a united front, Hinata Dono. You're right, Testarossa-san. With you as a partner, I can rest assured. Fufufu, it is the same for me. And so, an impromptu duo was formed to take on Vega. Vega versus Testarossa and Hinata. And Feldway versus Rudra. The final battle in the royal capital had begun. Two beautiful women stood in front of Vega. Testarossa was smiling bewitchingly, while Hinata was smiling coldly. I'm going to finish him off, so would you mind keeping him occupied for a while? Yes, of course. He seems to be difficult to kill with a sword, and widespread annihilation magic cannot be used in the royal capital, so let's share the work. As smart people, it was easy for them to come to an agreement. Testarossa stepped back and began to search for the range of influence of the power that Vega had activated. That tended to be neglected while fighting, but this time, she activated her detection spell carefully in order to kill him seriously. Hinata stood in front of Vega. "Oh hey, what happened to my buddy Damrida and the other bastard?" "They have gone back, I see. They looked like they were going to do some damage, but they're not my enemy. Neither are you guys. You got carried away just because you beat my evil dragon spawns, but let me give you a reality check." Vega boasted to Hinata. As a former colleague, Damrida had felt that Vega was quite capable. However, he had thought that the current Vega was no match for him and did not consider him a threat. Even so, he felt that it would be annoying to be swarmed by such a strong class of people, so Hinata's words that Damrida had gone back honestly made him happy. Well, it was just that it was less troublesome. "Well, what do you think? Don't underestimate me, or you'll regret it." Even Hinata could see that Vega was a very powerful opponent. Normally, Hinata would try to instigate things from the start, but she understood that it would be ridiculous for her to say such a thing now. The right thing to do was to win and show her strength. As soon as the exchange was over, Vega moved. He chose to use his greatly increased strength and speed to confront Hinata head-on. Vega's stiff arm destroyed an object with a shockwave even though it had not been touched. The same went for his kicks. His entire body had become an incarnation of destruction that surpassed that of strategic weapons, and he was causing extraordinary damage to those around him. If it weren't for the material area, the capital would have been reduced to ashes in a matter of minutes. Exposed to such a tyranny, Hinata would normally have been in great trouble. In fact, Hinata's existence value had increased significantly, but Vega's rate of increase was even greater. The difference was more than tenfold, and he even possessed the ultimate skill. Even though Granbell had awakened her as a hero, Vega was still too dangerous for Hinata. And yet, Hinata was unfazed. "It's strange. I'm not scared at all. And for some reason, I can read the flow of attacks." It was more accurate than the predict future attack that Rimuru had mastered and could now be called future prediction. It was no wonder, then, that Hinata's current skill was confirmed. Unique skill mathematician has evolved into ultimate skill Fate King Fortuna. Successful. With the evolution of Hinata herself, she had reached the ultimate realm. This Fate King Fortuna included the abilities Thought Acceleration, Universal Perception, Divine Haki, Space-Time Manipulation, Multidimensional Barrier, All of Creation, Computational Domain, and Virtual World. By making full use of these powers, Hinata was able to embody an almost perfect future prediction. It was only through this power that Hinata was able to master Granbell's sword technique, True Slash. Hinata had lost her unique skill Usurper, but because she had made Fate King Fortuna her own with such talent, she did not need it. Hinata was able to see through all of Vega's tricky attacks, including altering himself and branching his arms. Even when Vega was several times faster than her, Hinata was able to toss him around with ease. "Damn it, you're just jumping around." No matter how terrible Vega's shockwaves were, they wouldn't do much damage to Hinata if it didn't hit her directly, especially now that she was able to turn into a full spiritual life form as a hero. Of course, if it was Vega, whose entire body was hardened with mythical-grade armor, he might be able to kill Hinata with just one blow. However, Hinata now had truth in her hands. Until now, it would have been difficult for her to even take him on seriously, considering the difference in weapon performance, but with truth, there was no need to worry about that. Combined with Hinata's future prediction calculation, it was possible to parry Vega's attacks head-on. Although the difference in strength was too great and there was a need to adjust the angle, it was an easy task given Hinata's skill level. "You're not going to hit me. Damn it. However, you don't have the means to reach me." Vega shouted, unwilling to admit defeat, but he still had a point. But there was no need for Hinata to be ashamed of that. After all, that's what Testarossa was there for. It's very helpful to have a good vanguard. I'm ready. Well then, please go ahead. Yes. There's no need for repentance, you can go straight to purgatory. Viga's survival instincts told him that he was in trouble. Don't screw with me. Wait. Wait for. But Testarossa did not listen to Viga's pleas for his life. White flare. Testarossa had created the ultimate magic, interpersonal magic with her ultimate skill Death King Belial, that is, the white flare. It consumed life and reaped death. There was no escape for those who had been targeted by it, their bodies would be consumed by the white flames, and they would be cast into hell. It was a terrible magic that caused no damage to the surrounding area, but its power and heat level surpassed that of nuclear magic. There was nothing he could do about it, Viga was burned to the ground in an instant. But Testarossa's expression was dark, the worst. Apparently, it seems that I've failed. She muttered gravely. Overhearing this, Hinata asked, "What do you mean by that?" "I was unable to reap that fool's soul. Perhaps if it were anyone else, but my eyes can't be deceived." When Viga died, Testarossa took in a massive amount of soul. However, there was no scent on it that could be attributed to Viga. Hinata thought to herself. That magic was of a terrible nature. Even I think it would be difficult to withstand. Would I be able to escape it? If it were her, she would definitely be defeated the moment the spell was activated. Hinata admitted this but then retracted her argument when she remembered Viga's attitude. Or rather, it's likely, I'm almost certain that they've escaped. You think so too? Yes. Because that guy seemed like he was acting. Yeah. The begging for his life wasn't as desperate or sneaky as it should have been. Testarossa had heard a lot about Viga's despicable behavior from Moss. He was a cowardly bastard who would immediately pull the trigger if he knew he was at a disadvantage. The fact that such a man did not stop looking down on her until the end assured her that he did not think he would die. It's the worst. I'm so embarrassed, I don't think I can face Rimuru-sama. Testarossa was writhing in shame over her mistake. And so was Hinata. I can just see Rimuru's face, so happy to hear my story. Just great, that guy, he's always so delighted when I fail. She couldn't stop thinking about it. I'm always right. With an expression like that, Rimuru was very pleased when Hinata was in trouble. She hated him for that, but at the same time, she was pleased that he was happy whenever she relied on him. Hinata had mixed feelings about that. Moss, who was listening to the conversation of these women, thought in silence as if he were air. If I do it, I'll be tormented for 300 years or so, he thought. To say that he had let the enemy escape, he was too scared to report it. However, Moss was not foolish enough to point out his superior's mistake here. He knew from the bottom of his heart that if he did such a thing, he would be blamed for not keeping a watchful eye on things. If other executives blame me, Testarossa-sama will be in trouble. For the time being, Moss was depressed, expecting that his boss would be in a bad mood. At the very least, he secretly hoped that he would not be the one to bear the brunt of it. Rudra leisurely took off his emperor's coat and left it in Veilgrin's hands. Now wearing a shirt, he looked at Feldway. Come, Deva. Rudra's favorite sword from his hero days answered his call. It was a sacred sword, given to Rudra by his friend and mentor, Veldenava. Its grade was the highest of all mythical grade swords. The Asura and the Deva were a pair of swords that could be boasted as the most powerful swords ever made. While the Asura, which was given to Guy and later to Milim, was a long, curved, single-edged sword, the Deva was a normal-sized, double-edged sword. Because of its ease of use, it was a perfect match for Rudra. Feldway narrowed his eyes. That sword is Veldenava-sama's. That's right. I got it from him. That's unforgivable. It's too valuable to be wasted on a mere mortal. What do I care? Rudra walked towards Feldway. Veilgrind watched anxiously but did not wish to interfere. She believed in Rudra. So then, you're still a coward, huh? You're the type of person who would never use all your strength to decide between two people. What does that matter? The leader must outlive everyone else. You're well aware of that, aren't you? Well, I suppose. But if that's the reason why you miss the chance to win a battle you could have won, it's not worth it, is it? What are you? I'm grateful. If you hadn't relied on the Justice King Michael and fought Grin on your own, she would have been injured much worse. However, I won't forgive you for hurting her. Prepare yourself. By the time he finished, Rudra was in close proximity to Feldway. He casually swung his sword. Feldway caught it with his own. The sword, just like with Rudra and Guy, was given to Feldway by Veldenava. It was a masterpiece named the Ark. The grade of the swords was the same. The rest of the battle would be decided by skill level. The ground was shattered by the footsteps and even the air was broken by the impact of running through the sky. The impact of the swords clashing was so great that the smell of burning air filled the surroundings. It's tremendous. Hinata muttered, who was now one of the spectators. Hinata's mentor, Granbel, respected Rudra as a master, and his power was real. Despite the fact that he was inhabiting the fragile body of Masayuki, his power was equal to that of Feldway's. No, it was more than that. After several clashes, Feldway was the one who was outmatched. You're weak, bastard. Don't you dare make a fool of me, Rudra. Humph, that's what happens when you rely too much on your skills. I knew you were trying to copy me, but you can't be that naive. Rudra's sword flicked Feldway's sword away. There was an overwhelming difference in ability. The ultimate skill Justice King Michael is a complete defense in the truest sense of the word. I had been using it for a long time, so I'm sure of it. However, while it's active, you can't take any offensive measures, right? No magic, no other powers, no fighting spirit, aura. You can't even use magic to deflect attacks. However, there was a loophole. Although it was impossible to blow off attacks with things like fighting aura, the overwhelming power of Haki was effective. Besides, he could attack with handheld weapons without a problem, though that was the main concern. Rudra was proficient in this. He was so skilled that he was able to release the castle guard only at the moment of attack and increase the power through his fighting aura. You knew that, so you misunderstood that you were in a one-sided position, but it was a strategy that was possible because you were me. If you're not the best with a sword, you'll easily lose your means of attack. His words hit the nail on the head. Feldway knew this because he had been a member of Rudra's inner circle. Therefore, when he acquired the ultimate skill Justice King Michael, he tried to recreate that power, but it was not so easy. It was not a skill that Rudra had learned overnight, but rather a method of combat that he had learned over and over again while being beaten down by his master, Veldenava. That's why it was a great achievement to even be able to imitate him. Besides, losing a sword fight did not mean that the castle guard had been broken. Feldway was still intact and he had not lost his overall advantage. Yes, I'll admit to your point. However, don't think you've won. Feldway spoke arrogantly. He was so confident in his own defense that he believed he would never be defeated. However, Rudra replied to Feldway as if to ridicule him. You really think you can beat me, don't you? Do you have any idea how many years I spent with Veldenava after he entrusted me with Justice King Michael? What do you mean? I'm asking you if you really think that I didn't come up with a way to attack it, you fool. Do you think there's any way to defeat the most powerful of all angelic, no, ultimate skills? You can't bluff your way through me. Even so, Rudra only snickered. Then he narrowed his eyes and thrust his sword at Feldway. I'll tell you something. What I received was the Covenant King Uriel. What do you think its characteristics were? It's just a power for management purposes. Veldenava Summer used the Covenant King Uriel to figure out how to create his many powers. Upon being asked by Rudra, Feldway answered. It was the correct answer, but it did not express the whole truth. There's more to it than that. As you may know, the Covenant King Uriel also had the ability to listen to the voices of the people. Or rather, the voices of those connected to Veldainava. It could be a wish for hope, a prayer for salvation, or any number of other desires, but it didn't lose its power when I had it. So what do you mean? See the resemblance? With the Justice King Michael you're using now, as long as there was loyalty to its owner, the castle guard was invincible. In other words, the Covenant King Uriel and the Justice King Michael were similar in the sense that they listened to the voices of those who were connected to them. By the way, Covenant King Uriel also has an absolute defense, which is an application of the infinite prison and can be broken at the critical moment. I'm proud to say that the means of attack I devised by using it was quite impressive. Rudra grinned after saying this. He lightly swung Deva in his hand, making its blade glow with light. You can see it, can't you? 74. Upon seeing the light, Feldway's face changed color. He realized at a glance that it had the same properties as the castle guard he wore. The more people who believe in me, the more power I have. How many of your followers do you have? I've got over 1 billion people counting on me. Rudra's words were true. The total number of Feldway's followers was less than 1 million. The number of those who believed in Feldway had been greatly reduced and was now believed to be less than 300,000. On the other hand, the number of those who believed in Rudra reached 800 million among the subjects of the empire alone. Here in the royal capital of Ingratia alone, millions of people had placed their hope in Rudra. Rather, it was for Masayaki, but since they were the same person, it was accepted without any issues. There was a huge gap between Rudra and Feldway in regard to the absolute number of supporters they had. Feldway's face twisted in frustration as he realized this. This is the deadly blow that will unleash the united will of those who believe in me, absolute severance. Feldway could sense the danger. Quit screwing around. How can you use the power of the Covenant King Uriel? It's still missing. When Veldainava died, the Covenant King Uriel was supposed to be lost. And yet, Rudra was using it as if it were only natural. It was an unacceptable situation. You're not paying enough attention. For that matter, that grand guy was using Hope King Sariel too. Rudra told him in utter exasperation. Masayaki's King of Heroes could even recreate skills that had disappeared. Rudra smiles broadly, as if it didn't matter what he told them. You really don't like these tactics, do you? Veilgrind was also exasperated, but more than that, she was in love with Rudra's bravery, and in the end, no one other than Rudra's sister Lucia had ever cautioned him. This was a scene that had been repeated in the past, and it was being recreated precisely now. If so, then you. That's right. I can use the Justice King Michael right now, but the one who's going to end you here is the Covenant King Uriel, who boasts the strongest attack power. Che? Feldway was on full alert, mobilizing not only the castle guard but also all of his barriers in a defensive posture. And immediately after that, I've been waiting. Let's see how long you can hold out. At Rudra's voice, the ultimate blow was unleashed. It's not going to work, Rudra. Star King Dragon Flash, Nova Break. The clash was instantaneous. A terrifying rampage of destruction erupted on the spot. The material area meant nothing. Even though Veilgrind had contained the main shockwave and sent it skyward, it was still shattered in the aftermath. This was not the kind of power that could be generated by mere swordplay, but this was what made Rudra. Irrational strength, that was the power of the hero of the beginning who could compete with Guy. And of course, it was Feldway who fell. Well, that's a fair result. Rudra smiled refreshingly and raised his right hand to the sky. It was, without a doubt, a declaration of victory. Feldway fell to his knees and coughed up blood. His blood was crimson, staining his pure white robes. It can't be, I'm the one. You're too conceited, Feldway. It's always been that way, but you've always thought you had to be the best in everything you do. That's why you lose sight of the essential. Don't make me puke. I don't need to be told what to do by someone who's a shell of his former self. You're right. That's why I can understand some things. The victor and the vanquished fell silent and stared at each other for a moment. Feldway was the next to move. There will be no next time. Today's defeat will be your last. And with that, he stood up as if the injury he had just sustained had never happened in the first place. If it weren't for the crimson flowers blooming on his clothing, one would have thought that the attack from Rudra's sword had been an illusion. You're still as stubborn as ever. Well, I'll always win, no matter how many times you come, so be my guest. The two men looked at each other again, and then away. Feldway turned his back on Rudra, and ordered Mai, who had been waiting at a distance, to disappear from the scene with instantaneous movement. Not only the material area, but also the barrier of the royal capital had been destroyed, so it was impossible to prevent his escape. However, it was a good decision not to pursue him. Even though he was wounded, Feldway still had a lot of power left. Although he had been mentally cornered by the defeat from Rudra, his fighting ability was still sufficient. If it had not been for the defeat of the invincible castle guard, he would not have chosen to flee so easily. Feldway swore revenge on Rudra, never forgetting today's humiliation. Now then, as for the victorious Rudra. Great job, Rudra. Rudra's face was pressed against Veilgrind's chest, and he seemed to be in no mood to complain. No, upon a closer look, it was something else. He was blushing and his eyes were spinning. It wasn't Rudra anymore, he was back to Masayuki again. He had used up all his soul power when he had unleashed the Nova Break, and it had become difficult for him to maintain his Rudra persona. That was the reason why he had missed Feldway. Rather, until Feldway's departure, Rudra's personality had only been maintained through sheer force of will. Hinata walked up to Masayuki, who had been released from Veilgrind. It's nice to meet you, First Summer. 75 My name is Hinata Sakaguchi. Before you leave, I wanted to say a few words. In the middle of Hinata's greeting, the noise of the people began to be heard. Seeing how strong Rudra was, they were excited that Masayuki had taken things seriously. It was a misunderstanding, but to those who did not know the situation, it was the truth. When they saw that the battle was over, they came rushing to the area. Once they were within a certain distance, they formed a circle around Masayuki. This was the result of minutes and the others taking the lead and holding back the people. Wow, Masayuki sounds so cool. I saw it for the first time. The true beacon of light. Yeah. I had no idea what was going on, but I could tell it was awesome. And so, naturally, the credit went to Masayuki. Because Rainer and the others had made the video available, there were many people in the capital who had witnessed the entire thing. No, that wasn't me. No, it was me, but Masayuki's inner thoughts were in turmoil. However, he activated on his It Never Happened skill and succeeded in making a face that seemed to say, it was only natural, and so. How on earth did this happen? That was Masayuki's current state of mind. From Masayuki's point of view, Rudra had done everything on his own. Even though he was told that he was amazing, it didn't really feel like it. It was difficult for him to accept such praise without thinking of himself as another person, but the people didn't understand his feelings. Thank you for your hard work. You looked great, Masayuki. Veilgrind handed him a jet black, gold embroidered emperor's robe, and as he put it on, he tried to think. It was embarrassing to be the center of public attention, but he also had a feeling that there was trouble to come. To be more specific, the knights of the capital had arrived. Wow, this is going to be troublesome. As Masayuki's escort, Minutes was acting as a negotiator. He seemed to be refusing the request, saying that if they wanted an audience with His Majesty the Emperor, they should talk to them first. He listened to the conversation, thinking that his escorts were very reliable, but the content of the conversation was very disturbing. It sounded like the king had been assassinated, but Masayuki had nothing to do with it. Masayuki's heart continued to pound as he heard something about an important witness. He had been through a lot of hardships, and now he was able to accept any difficulties naturally. That's what he had thought, but now he realized that that was an exaggeration. Although he has gotten accustomed to the nervous tension of public appearances, Masayuki was still a bit of a coward. Not to mention, he'd rather not be suspected of murder. I'm sorry. I seem to have gotten you involved in our situation. Hinata, noticing that Rudra had reverted back to Masayuki, softly apologized. Raina murdered King Egil and blamed me for his sins. No way, Masayuki thought. That's such a big deal. It was hard to be involved in such an incident and accept it. But it was also impossible to pretend that he had nothing to do with it now. Even if he wanted to complain, there was no one to complain to. After all, Masayuki was the most important person here right now. Masayuki had no choice but to take charge of the situation. As the crowd continued to cheer, Masayuki took a step forward. Then, as he always did in practice, he tilted his head at an angle and looked down. After a 2-second pause, he turned his head to the front and looked at the audience. Just by doing this, the excitement of the people was palpable. It was frighteningly effective. As expected, it's exactly as Rimuru-san told me. That's right. Masayuki's current gesture was the result of Rimuru's guidance, or rather, it was the result of practice based on Seal's production. By adding the gestures that were calculated to win the hearts of the people, the effect of his skill was increased, and now that it had evolved into the King of Heroes, the effect was enormous. Everyone, please calm down. I need you to stay composed and tell me what happened. When Masayuki quietly began to speak, the excited people fell silent at once. Like a receding wave, the entire area was enveloped in silence. Masayuki was inwardly horrified at the unimaginable impact of his influence. This was the achieved effect after only a small amount of performance guidance. With nothing to do but to laugh at the situation, Masayuki resolved to continue his performance. Okay, don't panic and take your time. Even if you stutter or choke a little, it's fine because there's a way to fix it. Was that it? Ever since he decided to become emperor, Rimuru had consulted him many times. There were many other people who supported Masayuki, and he was now able to play the role reasonably well. It never occurred to those who were watching him intently that Masayuki was actually really nervous. Everyone. What is right and what is wrong? I think it should be obvious from this scene. If you are wise, you will know the right answer without me saying anything. I ask that you believe in that answer, and I want to believe in you, too. Masayuki didn't think he was explaining himself very well. Nevertheless, he was convinced that it would have a significant effect. Because that was the effect of Masayuki's King of Heroes. He didn't know what the right answer was, but at the least, he wanted to avoid the hostility of the people. It seems that he succeeded in doing so and decided to take this opportunity to lead the people in a cynical manner so as not to be taken advantage of. It's perfect. I didn't say anything important, so I can't be blamed if I'm wrong. Masayuki praised himself inwardly. As Masayuki began to speak, the crowd that had been in an uproar suddenly calmed down. Along with that, minutes came up to Masayuki with a knight in tow. He was a large man with a stern face and metal armor all over his body. Masayuki was scared. However, the knight saluted Masayuki with the highest of respect. It is my great pleasure to have an audience with His Majesty Masayuki, champion of my kingdom of Ingratia and emperor of the Great Eastern Empire. Ah, yes. Masayuki was overwhelmed and just nodded his head. However, he felt compelled to say what he needed to say and opened his mouth to the knight. King Egil. He had heard that the King of Egil was killed, but it wasn't Hinata-san who did it. He was about to continue, but the knight interrupted him and spoke up. Please rest assured. If His Majesty Masayuki is on her side, then the suspicions about Hinata Dono can be cleared. Rather, we, the Knights of Ingratia, would never suspect Hinata Dono. The knight laughed loudly. So then, have we identified the culprit? Hinata glanced at Prince Elric. He had been trembling behind the fountain ever since the battle had started, but Moss had moved him out of the way. It was not a kindness, but an instruction from Testarossa. It was an act to secure the culprit, and not to allow him to escape. Seeing such a situation, anyone with an intelligent mind would have been able to guess who was behind this. It may be true that the king was murdered, But was Hinata really the culprit? These were the questions that came to the people's minds. Prince Elric was certainly a popular man, but it was only by looking at the sequence of events that the full picture of what had happened became clear. Masayuki knew nothing about the incident, but Hinata had been looking at Prince Elric. At that moment, he looked up and she met Elric's eyes. Foo foo ha 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 ha. It's all over now, I'm ruined. Elric suddenly started laughing as Masayuki looked at him. And then, for some reason, he took the liberty of confessing his misdeeds. No, what? I don't understand the situation, but what's going on? It was just that Elric misunderstood that he had seen through everything and self-destructed on his own. Unbeknownst to Masayuki, he decided to hide his inner turmoil and continue acting as if he understood everything, and so, the situation came to an end with a furious turn of events. It seems that Masayuki-sama has identified the culprit and solved the problem. Prince Elric killed His Majesty the King, his father. The mastermind behind it was Reiner, the former commander of the Night Order. That's why Hinata-sama. Reiner was the bastard who blundered at the council meeting, wasn't he? Oh, how shameful of the former commander of the Knights of Ingratia. So, then he was trying to take revenge on Hinata-sama with the help of a monster? But it was our Masayuki-sama who saw through that and resolved Hinata-sama's dilemma. As expected of Hiro-sama. Even though he became the emperor of the Eastern Empire, he still remembered us. The prince's confession was decisive. The people were convinced without needing any explanation from Masayuki or Hinata. Hooray, Masayuki-sama! Glory to our Masayuki-sama! Such cheers naturally arose. It quickly spread among the people, and the chorus began, Masayuki, Masayuki, Masayuki. And it wasn't long before the royal capital was filled with the usual cheers. With one hand raised awkwardly and his cheek twitching, Masayuki responded to the people. The contrast between Hinata's slightly dumbfounded expression and Vielgrin's satisfied look was striking. Masayuki's inner self was filled with tears and screamed whatever, I don't care anymore ! But that's just the way things always were. Incidentally, the next day, Masayuki suffered terrible pains from the after-effects of harboring Rudra, as well as from a variety of other reasons, regardless of the use of restoration magic. This included a very rare kind of growing pain called soul pain, but he had no way of knowing that now. Michael was acutely aware of his own naivety. To be honest, at first he had thought that the demon lord Rimuru was insignificant. That changed the moment Rimuru defeated Vielgrind. From then on, he regarded him as an enemy and took extra precautions. Even so, he still thought that he would not be much of an enemy in a head-on battle. But now, Michael had no choice but to admit that he had been naive. After all, the demon lord Rimuru had entered the suspended world, a place that only a limited number of people were allowed to enter, without permission. What a troublesome guy. He's always getting in my way. At this point, there was no point in stopping time. Michael lifted the time stop and decided to crush Rimuru with an overwhelming difference in power. The time stop had been obtained by analyzing Velzad's patient's King Gabriel, but it was useless to someone who could manipulate information particles at will. Since maintaining it would only consume unnecessary energy, he decided that it would be more advantageous to fight in a straightforward manner. In fact, Michael has gained great power by taking in the factors of the two true dragons. His body had been strengthened to the point of invincibility, and he was overflowing with energy, and that wasn't all. Michael, as befitting of the head of the angelic ultimate skills, was able to fully display all the powers he had analyzed and taken in. From Velzad's patient's King Gabriel, the concept of Fixation 76 had given him an unrivaled and powerful defensive ability. It was not as powerful as Castle Guard, but it was more useful in that it could be used to attack at the same time. Moreover, the concept of fixation had given him the ultimate time stop ability. As long as he had this, it was as if he could never be defeated by any entity. Another example was Vielgrind's Charity King Raguel, which boasted the ultimate offensive capabilities. The information from the Purity King Metatron that he had retrieved from Leon was also very useful in terms of energy efficiency. Even the powers he had lent out to his subordinates were at Michael's disposal. He could manipulate them at will, as he had done with the concealment power from Ario's punishment, King Sandalphone. For Michael, who had reached such a state of existence, there was no doubt that he could win any battle as long as he was present. He had been defeated by the hero Chloe, but that was only a parallel existence at less than 20% of his power. The current Michael was perfect, and his lost energy had been replenished. In fact, there was a disparity of more than 10 times between Michael and the demon lord Rimuru in front of him. He was assured that there was nothing to lose. In the first place, a serious Michael would have easily defeated Obera's army. Considering that, defeating Rimuru personally should have been a piece of cake. However, it was not that simple. This guy is a monster, Michael admitted from the bottom of his heart. Every attack he launched at Rimuru was unsuccessful. Even the Scorched Dragon Cardinal acceleration, which he had unleashed with deadly intent, was instantly drowned out. Michael could not believe his eyes. The moment he lost the overwhelming advantage of stopping time, he no longer had an effective means of attack against Rimuru. By the time he realized this, the battle had already been decided. All these attacks are so easy to understand. This is enough, I can handle. Just as he thought he was muttering something, Rimuru's threat level rose several notches. The color of his eyes glowed gold. Rimuru was no longer a reachable opponent for Michael. If he couldn't attack, then could he defend? Michael's castle guard was no longer effective, but he still had the Patience King Gabriel from Velzad. Its essence was fixation and boasted absolute protection. With that in mind, he activated the snow crystal to coagulate the moisture in the air. Pouring all his strength into it, he created an indestructible object that wrapped around Michael. However, this can be eaten too? Seriously? For some reason, Rimuru himself was surprised as he made a hole in the snow crystal. It was an unbelievable reality. What did you just do? What did you say just now? Michael couldn't help shouting. Rimuru replied matter-of-factly, I ate it. You ate it? Well, yeah. That's my ability. Well, I didn't think I could eat the barrier either, but I guess it's possible if you try. It couldn't be. Michael was astonished. What the hell are you talking about? He felt like shouting. Michael acted on the basis of rational judgment. That was why he could not simply nod his head to such an irrational story. But the results were all that mattered. Michael was not so incompetent as to ignore the reality shown before him. So, what should he do? All means of attack had been neutralized and his defenses were gone. You should run away, a calm voice whispered. At the same time, something else suggested that he should search for information here. Either way, Michael had parallel existence, so even if he was defeated here, he could be revived. In fact, since he had transferred his power to Feldway, it was possible to attack him even if it was reckless. However, Demon Lord Rimuru was too incomprehensible. And Michael's escape had already been blocked. I have confined this area to the imaginary space. With this, it is now impossible for Michael to escape from this place. He felt as if he heard an unidentified voice. He thought it was absurd, but apparently it was true. If so, there was only one answer, so there was no need to worry. If he couldn't defeat Demon Lord Rimuru here, then there would be no way out either way. In that case, I'll respond. I'll show you how serious I really am. Michael declared, attempting to summon not the sword in his hand, but the most powerful sword ever created. Come, Deva. But there was no response. Rudra, the true owner of the sword, was already using it, so there was no way it would respond to Michael's call, who was only a fake master. If he had been able to use parallel existence as Veilgrind did, he would have been able to understand the world as seen through Feldway's eyes. However, Michael, although he transferred the function as an ability, was not able to synchronize completely. The reason for this failure was that he thought it would be no problem to exchange information later. As soon as that happened, Michael just put divine energy into his sword. Rimourou's reaction was but he was ready to respond with his own sword. What about Deva? Never mind that. That's fine then, but... Rimorou looked a little unconvinced, but his expression tightened as Michael's divine presence increased. Then the two men went into the final battle. Melt/. Michael, having taken over Rudro's body, had already mastered his swordplay. It was impossible for the current Michael to recreate Rudro's most powerful technique, the Nova Break, but he was fully capable of using the most powerful sword techniques that manipulated one's spirit. He was also adept at disintegration and chosen to use the transcendental holy sword technique, Overblade, for this match. Rimorou, on the other hand, showed his hidden move without any hesitation. Void Collapse, World of 1,000 Blooming Changes '77. As if in courtesy to those who would soon perish, he generously revealed it to the public for the first time. It was a terrifying technique. The trajectory of the sword changed in thousands upon thousands of directions, slicing through the enemy with elusive movements. Its power was impeccable, and it scattered the target like a flower. It was out of the realm of human reach and seemed impossible for even a demon lord. The toughness of a true dragon, combined with the flexibility of slime, must have enabled him to achieve such an incomprehensible sword technique. It's over, I've lost. Michael realized that his body was disintegrating. And before he had time to face that inescapable reality. So then, do you have any last words? Rimorou asked him. Accepting defeat, Michael thought to himself. How could he have lost when he had outperformed them in every way? He could not find the answer. That's why he asked a different question rather than sighing in defeat. You, who are you? To which Rimorou replied with a puzzled look, me? I'm just a slime. What was he talking about? Michael suddenly felt ridiculous. He didn't care about his crumbling body, but for some reason. Perhaps, is this what it feels like to be happy? He suddenly understood. It was a feeling that he hadn't felt since his lord had abandoned him and his ego had grown. He had tried to imitate it, but later dismissed it as something that he could not understand. And now, in this last moment, he suddenly understood. It was something beyond his control, Michael thought in self-mockery. What slime? You're an anomalous existence that is too incomprehensible to be understood, and yet it suits you. You have defeated me, Amonis. The decay rate increased. As particles of light dispersed, more and more of his body was being chipped away. You know, I'm actually not alone. ? Take your time, you'll have to ask my partner about that. With that said, Rimorou broke off the conversation. His hand came to rest on Michael. Devour all things, void god Azathoth. For the first time in this world, the ultimate and most powerful skill bared its fangs, the irresistible power of Peace 78, the soul devourer '79, swallowed up all of Michael. In truth, he understood that he, his creator, had abandoned him. He didn't want to admit it, so he had struggled with it until now. But that was over now. It was warm with an all-encompassing completeness. A familiar comfort. Ah, I see, Michael thought as he faded away. Perhaps everything had just been a misunderstanding. Everything was here, and he felt himself becoming a part of it. Michael was no longer alone. This was inevitable, it must have all been part of a harmonious plan. Ah, my wish has been granted. Feldway, my only regret is leaving you behind. It suddenly occurred to him, and Michael's consciousness vanished into thin air. I confronted Michael and immediately realized. Oh, this is no big deal. Because Michael's attacks were too textbook. 80 It was good to be faithful to the basics, but he didn't seem to have any variety. In other words, he only threw strikes, so no matter how powerful they were easy to predict and easy to deal with. That's why Seal-san and I switched players as soon as the battle started, and I had a good time watching the high-level exchanges. During the battle, Michael had used a great defensive move, which made me nervous. No matter how much I could handle, the difference in strength was obvious. I thought that if he could create a defense barrier that I couldn't break, I would be helpless. However, Seal-san was even more amazing. No, seriously. It saw through the weaknesses of Michael's moves with scary calmness. As a result, even the defensive move called Snow Crystal was eliminated by Void God, Azathoth, in a matter of seconds. It was an overwhelmingly one-sided battle. Michael was so pitiful that I decided to score a complete victory. In the end, I showed him the Void Collapse, World of 1,000 Blooming Changes, which may have been a test in battle for Seal-san, but for me it was a final gift to Michael. I defeated Michael, but at the end, I was asked a strange question. Who are you? Even if asked, I'm honestly not sure. I am me. It's nothing more than that. However, that doesn't mean there isn't anything that comes to mind. Michael probably noticed Seal-san's existence. That's why I wanted to have them communicate from Monas to fellow Monas. Michael seemed to be proud of being a Monas, so it would be surprising for him to learn of Seal-san's existence, but it was the last time, so there was no problem. With that in mind, I activated my first use of the Soul Devourer ability on Michael. I was surprised when I did it. I had thought that it would be impossible to devour all of Michael, since his existence value was probably 10 times greater than mine, but Michael disappeared in an instant. And there was also the feeling of satiety. A feeling that I had never felt before, no matter what I ate, filled my heart. With this, the data of the 7 Angelic System Ultimate Skills are complete 81. Velzad's Dragon Factor has also been acquired, so I will start the analyze and assess. Well, not only was I satisfied, but Seal-san seemed to be happy as well. After the battle with Michael, I checked on Diablo and the others. I was glad everyone was okay. I have no excuse for my mistake this time, and I can't tell you. No, that was unavoidable. What can you do if they can stop time? No, I should have thought of more countermeasures. I regret that I naively thought that it would be of no use for those who could move within the time stop, and that it would only be less fuel efficient and less useful. I swear not to make such a mistake next time. Diablo was unusually depressed, and I had a hard time calming him down. I thought time stop was a foul, but since there were very few people who could handle it, I didn't think we'd need to worry about it that much. That's what I thought, but Diablo and Sue thought differently. Diablo, tell me how to deal with it too. I managed to get a sense for it, but it's difficult to go beyond that. If you know how to do it, please tell me. Of course, Sue Dono. And Ultima as well. They were enthusiastically discussing countermeasures. Well, yeah. If you're not careful, you can make the same mistakes over and over and again. If there is an answer for this, it is better to prepare in advance. I think that Diablo and the others' actions are not in vain, because they can think of a solution to any problem if given enough time. With that in mind, I decided not to interfere. It seemed that Leon had not regained consciousness yet, so I ordered Diablo to take him to Tempest. I didn't think he'd be a target anymore, but it was just in case. I also ordered Ultima to go to Shion's aid. Now that Dagrul was on the march, I decided that Lubelius would be the next battleground. Kufafufafu, I will be back soon, so it is goodbye for now. Well then, Rimuru-sama, I'm off. And the two immediately sprang into action. Veyron and Zonda followed Ultima, leaving Sue and I alone. However, there was still work to be done. Here, we would investigate the Holy Void Damargania. Dagrul didn't seem like someone who would betray us, so something must have happened here. I wanted to know what that was, and I also thought I should find out what the current situation was in this city. I'm counting on you, Sue. Understood. It was safe to leave it to Sue. After giving the instructions, I returned to the capital, which had been my last concern. But apparently, there was no need to panic. You're too late. It's over. Veilgrind proudly told me what had happened. Surprisingly, Masayuki had defeated Feldway, the enemy's leader. That's amazing. Wait a minute. Before you praise me, please listen to what I have to say first. Well, yeah. I understood. I'm sure Masayuki was not happy about this. But he still won, so he should be proud of it. I was relieved too. Really, I was just glad everyone was okay. I was relieved about it, but it seems that it was too early to relax. Soon after that, reports of the war situation began to arrive from all over the world. It was more horrible than I had imagined. My mind instantly switched to the upcoming battles. Epilogue. Evolving Malice. Feeling a great surge of power, it opened its eyes dimly. All it could see were the little people who always got in its way. The being that stood before it was eradicating the swarm of them. It was a force that even it, the world-destroying Dragon Ivorage, could not ignore, and the carnage ended in the blink of an eye. The victor, Michael, had left the scene without paying a single thought to Ivorage. A little uncomfortable with this, Ivorage moved slowly and walked over to the site of the battle. The remains of those who had fought against him for so many years. He unconsciously spoke of the many corpses floating there. Fools who launched feeble attacks that didn't even itch. Nevertheless, they were comforting to Ivorage's endless boredom. It was probably because he felt that their deaths were a bit of a waste that he took such a futile action. However, such a mere whim brought about an incredible change in Ivorage. Ivorage, a being without intelligence, without reason, and who had done nothing but carry out destructive actions out of instinct, was now imbued with an emotion. Until now, Ivorage's only purpose in life had been the urge to destroy. But in that moment, he felt hatred. It was the germination of an intellect and an emotion. Even the gods could not have foreseen that the grudges of those who were destroyed by Michael would provoke Ivorage. Moreover, the transformation did not stop there. As a result of taking in more than 10,000 souls, Ivorage had entered a time of evolution. No. It should be said that the time had arrived. The evil god would be reborn as an incarnation of malice. More cunning, more evil, and more intent with the goal of destroying the world. Just before it began, the evolution into an evil god, the Halloween Carnival, Ivorage did indeed see it. Michael had left, and the gate to the other world had opened. Looking forward to it, Ivorage fell asleep. What was beyond that gate? And what joyous events awaited him there? And, was there an enemy worthy of this hatred? Ivorage wondered, his heart almost bursting with anticipation. These were new emotions, desires he should never have had. But it was too late. The day of awakening of the dreaming evil god was near. Afterward. It's been a long time, everyone. For the first time, the deadline was extended by 1 month. I thought it was going to be a disaster when I started writing it, but then I felt that it was actually impossible. As I was rearranging the contents for the completion, various developments came to my mind. The reason was that I couldn't write them down easily, because whatever I added would have a big influence on the future. Of course, I had other work to do as well, and one of the reasons was that I couldn't switch my mindset well. I feel that my brain is not working as well as it used to, and I wonder if it's my age. When I mentioned this to Isan, he gave me a warm encouragement saying, "Don't make excuses like that, just write it down." I don't get it. He even told me that he would never change the schedule of the next volume, so I will start the next volume as soon as I finish this postscript. Oops, the manuscript still has to be revised before that. Proofreaders are really amazing. They search not only for inconsistencies in the current volume, but also for errors in the entire volume set. However, with so many volumes, it seems that small discrepancies tend to accumulate. It would be easier if it were just a matter of spelling mistakes or rewriting the text to make it easier to understand. In my case, I started writing with only a rough plot, so I did most of the checking only in my head. I realized that I could only get away with that for a short number of books, and reminded myself to refine the plot before I start writing. And so, here is the 19th volume. The last war has broken out, and the forces are locked in a standoff in various places. I cannot write everything in this volume and will continue to the next volume as a matter of course. This is how I would like to run through the remaining 3 planned books. Michael San, who was a candidate for the last boss, has left the scene, and I wonder who will become the last boss. I have a vague idea in my head, but whether it will be adopted or not depends on the future. It is quite common for me to change my direction while writing. I will continue to work hard on the story so that readers can enjoy it more. I hope that you will continue to support that time I got reincarnated as a slime. See you in the next volume.